All right, we're going to say welcome and greetings and all this. Hello, everybody. We are here for day 2 of this fantastic match. Day 1 was a blast. Super good match so far between Grandmaster Sam Shankland and Niels Grandelius. Let me see if I can add their video cameras to the show. They're ready to go. Our podcast ran over 10 minutes. If they're upset at me, they haven't yet insulted me, which is very kind of them. Let me see if I can get their videos on here. Where is the video? Does that do it? Oh, yeah. I got them on. All right. So, gentlemen, I do present my excuses for the delay. It was not something that obviously I wanted to do. We're just trying to fit in a lot in our channel in our days here. Are you both good to go? You want to just get to the chess? All right. I will mute myself on the Zoom call. Good luck. Start your game whenever you like. And I will talk to the audience. So, welcome everybody to the match. They are going to get started now. I'm going to close these little pop-up windows here. We're going to go over here, get our windows organized. We've got the scores. We've got the match. We're going to go to players. We're going to hope that chess.com is working well today, and we're going to watch them go. So they've switched color order compared to yesterday. Yesterday, the match started with Niels having white in games 1 and 3, Shankland having white in games 2 and 4. Today, Shankland has white in games 1 and 3, and Niels has white in games 2 and 4. That said, so far, white hasn't been a dramatic advantage in any of the games that they've played here, and they are kicking things off on the frontiers of chess opening theory here. So this is back to the Najdorf. Today, Shankland, instead of playing h3 like yesterday, he switches to bishop e3, the more standard main line. Probably expecting e5, knight b3. But Niels plays e6, which has been under a slight cloud, theoretically, at the Super GM level because of this bizarre little move, 7a3. The idea of which is, well, there's multiple ideas to it, but basically it's anticipating b5 and being able to prevent b5 and then play g4. If you play g4 immediately here, it gets into these complicated lines like this, which have been analyzed out, or what's the other one? I think there might be like a line like h5 here, knight e4, something like that. So anyway, those lines got like analyzed out, but somehow Super GMs have discovered that if you play a3, you are now able to play g4 against b5, I think. So Niels plays h5 to stop the g4 move, and Shankland switches to an f4 setup now with this a3 move already in, and I can imagine his bishop going to d3, queen coming to f3. We'll see if that's true or not. Bishop d3, queen c7, queen e2, b5. All right, so Niels playing very quickly. He was prepared for this, so to speak, refutation of the e6 variation. And let's see. Here, Shankland can already start considering moves like e5, knight takes e6, bishop g6, check. He could set it up by castling queenside first. Oh, he's moved. So he probably castled queenside. Yep, he played that quickly, 6 seconds. Okay, so probably prepared to play either e5 followed by knight e6 or bishop takes b5 next here. Some kind of sack on the next move would be desirable. Rook b8 from Niels, and I think I've got a feeling e5 knight e6 is on the docket. I'd like to welcome everybody to the show. Sorry the chess action is so quick that I haven't introduced the format, the players, nothing, but you know, it's just it's a joy to see these two Najdorf experts getting into this battle so quickly and so booked up. We have a lot to learn from how they handle this. Shankland goes h3 with the idea of g4. Normally the move h4 answers that pretty easily. Niels is having a look like maybe something is up. Oh, I got to close that thing there, and hopefully, yeah, my video still lines up okay. All right, to my right, you can see the scoring system and the scores currently in the match. It might be too small for you to read easily, so I'll just tell you quickly that yesterday Shankland won 2 games, scoring 5 points per win. And Niels had the upper hand in 2 draws that finished with him having an extra pawn. And so he scored 3 points versus 1 point for Shankland in 2 draws that were favored to Niels versus Sam. Oh, let me switch their names since they've switched their... No, let me see if I can just do this. That'll be easier. All right, we've got the names appropriately below the players. Thank you. Oh, really? That's very cool. Foos is saying that he has actually played against Vyacheslav Rutar, the sponsor of this match and the originator of this scoring system. If the action would slow down for a moment, I could go and explain to you guys the scoring system, but I'm going to guess that some of you were here yesterday, so it may not be as critical. We're definitely going to go over it at some point. The chess is played exactly the same. It's just how draws are scored that has changed for today's for this match yesterday and today. We are in an 8-game match. 4 games played yesterday, 4 games to be played today. The time control is 15 minutes plus a 5-second increment. And let's see, Shankland has now got g4 in. There's a rook trade. Niels has opened the b file against the b2 point. Sam has built up a pretty big space advantage and has the h file. Sam's minor pieces are a little bit more developed and active. You would guess like maybe a small advantage for white, but it's certainly a battle. I think maybe Shankland's got a threat of g5, g6. You kick the knight and then you break the structure. So Niels probably wants to play a move like knight c5 to guard e6. I don't know for sure. An alternative would be to attack b2 with a move like queen b6, queen b8, queen b7. You got to be careful which one you do because white's got threats. So like queen b8 would fail badly to this probably. Queen b6 would probably fail badly to this with the discovered attack on the queen. So that leaves just queen b7 as a move. But I don't know if this threat is strong enough. When you start making threats and your opponent starts ignoring you, let's see what Niels has done. He's played knight c5, the move I expected, defending e6. But I just want to quickly say, when you start making threats and then your opponent ignores you to make their threat and it starts being whose threat is bigger and you're ignoring each other and the pieces are hanging, that's classic open Sicilian, but it's also really dramatic. The initiative becomes like the prize that you're fighting for, and it's very, very sharp and calculation based. Very, very tough to assess things like this. My first instinct would be that Sam's threat is actually bigger than Niels' threat here with rook b2, which takes a pawn but doesn't threaten rook b1. And maybe even rook b2, knight b3 might not even be good for black. The rook might be stuck. So it felt like time to defend something with knight c5. And now it's on Shankland to think about g5, f5, e5, and rook h8, all his candidate moves. In terms of points, Sam is up 12-6, which is a little bit more than 1 game ahead. So there's plenty of room for Niels to strike back and win this match today. 1 single win for him, and the match would be all but equal. And there's 4 games to go, right? So g5 from Shankland. Yeah, that makes sense. He's going to kick the knight to a somewhat worse square here. It's a good time to do it. If you wait around, black might be able to play g6 and put the knight on h5, or black might be able to play d5 or something, right? So it's time to kick that knight. And does the knight have to go to d7, or is there any interest in maybe knight takes d3 check in this position? I mean, knight d3, queen d3, you'd probably still go to d7, so I don't know that it would change much. But I guess knight d7 maybe gives white a move where they could consider bishop c4. Then black has knight b6. I'm not impressed. So I don't think he has to go knight d3 now, but he could. He could if he wanted to. And while he's thinking, I'm going to quickly switch scenes here and give you guys a quick rundown on the scoring, okay? So below me, the match information, you can see in bigger print the points for wins, draws, and losses, etc. And you'll see that there's something called a favored draw and a disfavored draw, right? Which are worth 3 and 1. And that just means when the game is agreed drawn by any normal method, threefold repetition, 50 move rule, agreement between the players, when the game is agreed drawn, you count the pieces on the board. Basic material count: 1 point for a pawn, 3 point for a minor piece, 5 point for a rook, etc. You count up the points, and the person with more points has the favored draw, and the person with less points has the disfavored draw. And if the points are the same, it's an equal draw. And so that means that you've got king and rook against king and rook. It's an equal draw. Each player gets 2 points, a bit less than half of a win, right? So note that the win gets 5 points. It's a bit of a bonus for the win. Then if you have something like king and pawn against king, the side with king and pawn would be getting 3 points, and the side with just a king would be getting 1 point. So you're gradually getting ahead if you're making favored draws, but wins are still worth enough that you won't easily pass somebody who's winning games just by making favored draws, right? There's still a nice premium on winning. All right. So if it's wrong bishop and h-pawn, it's not quote-unquote just a draw. No, it's a favored draw. The side with the bishop and pawn that had the advantage and was pressing and just barely not able to win the game is still going to get some points in the standings to reflect the fact that they maybe outplayed the opponent over the course of the game. And that is the basic idea of what this scoring system is trying to solve. It's trying to solve for when one player outplays another player but is not rewarded at all by the point system because of the margin that you need to win a game at a grandmaster level. You need such a big advantage to win that often an extra bishop is not enough, right? All right, so knight fd7 happens as I expected. The thinking is back on Sam. His options are again going to be like rook h8 and g6. And maybe f5, but f5 not as obvious because now the black knight is even ready to just come to e5 quickly, right? So, yeah, I think, g6 and rook h8 are probably the most likely moves. I really think g6, pawn takes, e5, check here. That's pretty strong for white. G6, f6. Could you even go knight e6 with knight d5 coming? Let me just check real quick. It's not the most likely, but it's the most violent, so we're just going to quickly assess. Queen comes here. Can I justify giving up this piece? Maybe not quite. Maybe not quite. So more likely would be like f5 in this position, probably. Okay, Sam's made a move. Let's see what it was. Rook h8. Okay, I was right to still have it as a candidate, even though g6 looked really concrete. So the rook comes in. I still think white looks better. I think white looks quite a bit better, but Niels is ahead on time. Shankland looks thoughtful. He just spent 3 minutes on that move, which is a considerable think for a rapid game. I'm sure he spent a bunch of time calculating g6. In 3 minutes, how deep can a player like this get? Probably 5 moves for white and 5 moves for black, something like that, if I had to guess. Queen b7, bishop a6 could be a nice tactic in some case, Jason. Yeah, as long as the knight's on c5, you won't have it. But, when I sacked the knight on e6 and brought the knight to e6, there was this bishop a6 tactic, which was nice. It just wasn't good enough because I'd already sacked a piece. Wow. Seeing the chat on chess.com among the people observing this game reminds me of how nice our chat is over on Twitch and YouTube on the Chess Dojo channel. It's been a long time since I just chatted with the general chess population outside of the dojo. And, woo! I mean, it's interesting that there isn't an auto mod banning all these people. Anyway, it's great to be with all the rest of you. I appreciate you even more when I see these other people going. Okay, well, Niels is caught up on the clock with Shankland, reflecting on this rook h8 position. Again, it's a moment where you can consider trading and bringing the knight to c5, the second knight to c5, because this knight wants to get moving. You can also play a move like king e7 at some point, trying to get out of the pin and reduce some of white's tactical stuff, and you're not in range of g6 and these weak light squares. But you are in range of knight f5 check, knight d5, winning the game, right? So I think in this case, king here is not good. White would check, and then even if you say oops and fall back, you drop this pawn, and it doesn't feel like the moment to unpin. But I mean, it is a thought that you don't necessarily want your king on the file, on the rank with the rook long term, right? Okay, I think Grandelius is in huge trouble. Shankland's pieces are more mobile, more active. He's got more space. The rook is honed in. The king is a target. Yeah, it's looking really, really critical for Niels. I sense a tiny hidden excitement in Shankland's face, just sort of like bubbling up underneath it all. Like he tries to stay calm, but some part of him is starting to like lick its lips, you know, mentally, like, or wetting your chops or whatever it is when you're getting ready for a meal, you know, when you can start to smell the food. And Nordovic agrees that Shankland seems to have the juice in the current position. So, yeah, tough one for Niels with the two bishops on the back foot and the king already starting to get targeted. He can always grab the bishop pair on d3, but Shankland has just enough material to make some serious threats against the king anyway, with queen, rook, and a couple minor pieces. Okay, well, I don't see much other than playing knight d3 check and then knight c5 with the next knight, even though weirdly that removes a defender of this bishop, right? But at least, you know, it keeps white busy and it doesn't lose for a little bit. This rook seems to be, it would be better if the queen were in front of it, oddly. Okay, he's come up with something. Queen a5. Okay, headed towards a1 and b2, so some counterplay coming. And that was a reason not to trade on d3, because this move would be rebuffed by knight b3, except that he's got the knight on it. Okay, so he's allowing knight c6, but he's got queen a1, king here, and he comes in. One thing to note about knight c6 is it leaves the black king without any liberties. So we got to keep our eyes on that. It's horrible, isn't it, Oscar? You think it's just 5-year-olds? I mean, I've taught in kindergarten, and it does not sound like that in a kindergarten. Knight d4 to b1. Hard for that knight to get to b1. Could you maybe just play king to b1 to keep the queen out of a1? What would be the danger there? Okay, he does it. Yeah, I mean, I asked the question just in time. You're thinking b3, sorry. Yeah, knight b3, black could trade. Then maybe knight c5. And the b3 pawn's in danger. still playable for black for the moment. So I like this king b1 move a bit better, and Shankland's starting to have a little bit of a lead on the clock here. I mean, 3 minutes is something. By the way, hi Panda Chess Tamil. Glad you're doing well. Sorry there's so much going on the board. I haven't been able to say hi to you. You may recognize here Grandmaster Sam Shankland and Grandmaster Niels Grandelius. Shankland from the USA, Grandelius from Sweden. 2 top Grandmasters. They're in game 5 of an 8-game match. They played 4 games yesterday. And yeah, we're just kicking off today, and it looks like Sam's got a really great position out of the opening with white for this first one. If he could get off to a good start today, that's going to be depressing for Niels' chances to come back in the match. Whereas if Niels can either win or get a favored draw in the first game, he's going to feel like, the match is totally open and that what happened yesterday doesn't really matter. But if he starts off with a loss, it's going to be rough, right? Because he knows he lost yesterday, and then if he loses today, it's hard to keep thinking how you're going to win. Thinking like this is a pattern sometimes, getting this check in. And if the king has to move back and you recover a knight, it can be a good exchange sacrifice. But white seems to have knight b3 here, and black's down a rook, right? Another option is to come in like this. Knight takes d3 was just played by Niels, by the way. This move here, is threatening, and it threatens. I guess then the key move is knight b3 for white, threatening the queen, and the key tactic is knight takes knight, pawn takes queen, knight d4 check, winning the queen. After pawn takes rook, white's going to be up tons and tons of material, right? A full rook, because that pawn captures both of them. So I think queen a3 gets refuted by knight b3. Otherwise, this move could be quite threatening. You can't just play a move like bishop c1 because there's queen c3. Okay, so let's see what Niels chose. He chose knight takes d3. That was 2.5 minutes of thought. And it was 4.5 minutes on queen a5 the move before. This is very bad feeling and sign when you think 2 moves in a row. And Shankland recaptures relatively quickly, and Niels is back to thinking. So he just does not see how to make this game work out for himself. He could bring this knight to c5. Then he would perhaps be threatening rook b2, queen b4 finally. He could try queen a3, but the checkmate is defended at the moment. The knight would be threatened. Maybe Shankland would just defend the knight. And you're still looking for something to do as black. Can't move the king to e7 because of knight c6. You could consider bishop b7, but Shankland's got the light squares defended in advance at the moment, and he's going to look for a move like g6, trying to make progress on you. So a bishop b7 actually may be very necessary, because I'm just realizing that Shankland in this position would also have this knight b5 threat, I think. If I play a random move, g6, then knight to b5, hitting the queen and queen c8 is probably winning for white. Yep, it's made in a couple moves if you take the knight, because there's this. So, tough situation. Niels down to 2 minutes. He's going to need to find something amazing and hold the game in the middle game, because he's not even going to have time for the end game. So he threatens this knight against knight e6. He has queen c3 prepared. Against queen c2, he's planning to play rook takes d4, I suppose. Shankland's going to have to calculate pretty hard here, but presumably white has a winning move here, honestly. That's my instinct here, is that presumably there should be a more or less winning move for Shankland here. Between knight b3 and knight b5 and knight c2, something should be winning. Knight c2, there's queen c3. Knight b3, it would be like queen c7, right? Just saying you're not doing anything. Knight b5, you have to go queen c6. And then white doesn't really have a follow-up. Huh, okay. So knight db5, queen c6, I don't yet see a move. Queen d2 is a playable move that just holds things together, I believe. Or does it? Maybe not quite. Put this on the board and see if you guys see some kind of tactical move that I'm missing. Shankland looks a little bit concerned, like he hasn't found the move yet. Niels looks like he's dead but has a hope. That's how I read his face. Like, I know I'm dead, but maybe there's still a hope. Okay. I mean, Sam can play knight e6, queen c3, knight g7, take a couple pawns, but it doesn't feel like fully compensation. I just put that variation on the board for folks to just visualize it. You can go here, queen takes here. There's no mate threat. Knight g7, I was blundering that. Good thing I put it on the board. The queen c3 is covering it, so there's really no follow-up here, I would say. This variation here is a repetition, which is not very impressive. Shankland's been thinking for almost 3 minutes here, and I don't see it. I don't see it. Okay, oh, Juan Cruz finds a very interesting move. Knight e6, queen here, bishop d4. That definitely does something. It defends b2 extra, and it's got ideas to go after these 2 points. So if the queen saves herself, you can go knight f8, knight f8, bishop g7, which is completely winning. Black could take here, and then you have a choice between knight e6 and knight g6, which both look winning. They're both winning. So if you go bishop d4, I think what black would have to do is give in the queen, takes here with 3 minor pieces against the queen and pawn. However, the rook is weirdly placed, right? It's not got a lot of flight squares. And I'm concerned that white might be able to win the game immediately with either queen d2 or queen c2, trying to sort of cut off that rook. Here. The rook can sort of still get away. Oh, there's knight c5 too. Knight c5, that might keep the queen out. That might be the move black needs there. Yeah, that's a strong move. Oh, Shankland's played something. Let's see what he's played. Knight to d5 was not even on our list, right, folks? Wow. And that was the product of 5 minutes of calculation. He finds a move. It wasn't even on our candidate move list. I don't know if Neil saw it coming either, because he looks like he's dealing with some new variations, calculating some new stuff. If he'd fully prepared for this move, with 2 minutes on the clock, if Sam thought for 5 minutes. If he'd been able to predict this and come up with an answer, he would probably have tried to blitz out his next move. So there's rook d4 and there's pawn takes knight are the two main moves. He goes for rook d4. What's Shankland's plan going to be? Could be bishop d4, queen f2. I don't know for sure. Sam doesn't know for sure what his plan was. Wow, the pieces are just flying here. Okay, Shankland has just brought the rook back. Oh my god, the bait and switch. Headed to c8. What on earth is that move? Huge surprise for them. The queen is busy defending the rook. What if black takes and then takes on c1? And then saves the rook. What do you have? Rook and two pieces against a queen? Doesn't seem sound for white, does it? I mean, incredible points for creativity for Shankland. I don't think these moves are right, but who would ever even dream of these moves? And Niels is down to 30 seconds, so he needs to simplify, I want to say, not to underestimate his ability to play an insane position in just seconds every move, but it feels like you might want to simplify when you've got no time on the clock at all. The rook on h8 wasn't dead, Clock Goblin. It was definitely on a good square as well. Rook d5. Okay, so there it is. He's trying to trade some stuff off. Against bishop takes, he goes rook takes. And then it's just full-on 3 minor pieces. And that'll be a position that Niels can handle for sure with just seconds on his clock. Shankland's other choice is to play pawn takes rook, and then the queen goes to d5. And black's got 2 minor pieces. Yeah, just too much. And Sam trades off the rook. Oh, he's not doing too well here. Not doing too well. Niels thinking on the recapture, but I would think it would be the knight for sure, and he takes with the pawn. So he's trying to find a better square for this bishop, maybe? Shankland trying to get a pawn to the 6th rank to be able to bother the king. He needs a second piece for the queen to work with. On her own, she can't do nothing. The Clock Goblin, it was only good if the other pieces could eventually get there, but in a normal course of events, they would eventually have gotten there. It's just that Niels found that queen c5 move and started a bunch of tactical threats on Sam's pieces that Sam couldn't find the untangling solution to. Fantastic queen c5 move by Niels that really turned this game around. I think Shankland might want to attack that f7 pawn with queen h5 or something like that. He goes to h2, stopping knight e5 and stopping bishop d6. Just the kind of move that's uncomfortable when you're in time trouble and you just don't know what to do. And you need some sort of waiting move. An indirect move like this is annoying to handle. Right now, Venceslav can comment, but I think this would be an even draw if they agreed to a draw at this point. I do think that's how it would be scored. I do think that black's probably better if Niels had, an hour on his clock. Yeah, knight gets a great square. So basically, the stakes are very high if anybody wins a pawn here, because then it's going to... Like right now, if Shankland could give a perpetual check with the queen, or if Grandelius could just hold like a fortress or something, it would be an equal draw. But as soon as somebody, wins or sacks a pawn, then you've got that imbalance in the score where it would be 3-1, and they're going to be less inclined to take a repetition. Here against queen g8, there's bishop d7. Sam just improves the king a little bit. I think bishop d7 might still make sense for Niels, right? Oh no, he targets that pawn. Shankland might want to trade it off with d4. No, he aims at queen a8, which, I mean, if I were in time trouble, I wouldn't allow. I would repeat bishop c6. I just could not assess allowing queen a8. Now he goes for the move bishop d7, which I had expected before. And against queen h5, defending the pawn, he's going to try and either develop the rook or move the knight towards attacking this, right? Like knight c6, knight d4 if he could. Just seconds on the clock to play the whole game for Grandelius. Shankland repeats once. Oh, doesn't repeat. Goes to h5 instead of h3. King e8. Now queen h3 would be a repetition at the moment. I don't think Sam should believe too much in his position. He's basically glad that Niels has 10 seconds and is going to have trouble winning the game. But now he's hesitating. Sam is a little bit of a draw hater, draw avoider. Just a little bit too unwilling to take draws sometimes. Over presses from time to time. Far less than me, but there's just a little bit of that, right? And like here, he just wasted 30 seconds before repeating just because there's this part of him that felt like I should try to win. Here, queen h8 would be a threefold repetition, I think. Already, maybe, right? So he had it once, he played bishop b5, bishop c6, and then once he played bishop d7. This would be the third time around. Sam plays d4, yeah. Sam has lost a fair number of games in his career over pressing. I think he's basically just hoping he could win. I don't think there's any scenario where one would win this as white. Like, I don't think you can imagine like a setup where white would win. Maybe here he'll finally take a draw with queen e6, queen g8 repeated. I don't know. How does his face look? Upset that it's even? It looks like he's resigned himself to it now, to me, his face. But oh yeah, and he repeated once quickly there. There we go. An equal draw happens. It was extremely tense, that final thing. I think Sam was slightly unhappy about it, but it was a fair result, honestly. Because Niels played
5 minutes?
brilliantly that game.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
I'm going to keep my volume muted just so I don't encourage or discourage either player by them hearing me say that it was brilliant, which they should be okay with. But in any case, we're going to update the score. We're going to give 2 points to Shankland, 2 points to Grandelius. Sam missed a chance to really put the lead of that match in a painful place for Niels, right? If Shankland could have just won that game, which he had a great looking position out of the opening, his lead would have ballooned to 11 points with 3 games to go, and that would put tremendous pressure on Niels, who would basically need to win 2 of the last 3 games and get a favored draw in the 3rd game. I think that would be the minimum score he would need to bring back the match. And that would be an incredible mountain to climb, I think. So Sam not winning this is a golden opportunity missed for him. Niels survives a scare, doesn't bleed any more points, and so he can feel reasonably okay with that. Obviously, he's got some ground to make up in 3 games now instead of in 4, but he avoided disaster, and he's got white in the next game. if he scored 3 favored draws in the last 3 games, that would be just enough to pull even in the match. So he does not even need to win a game to tie up the match, if I'm counting this correctly. It's a little bit surprising. I would have thought he needs to win at least 1 game and then get a couple favored draws, but I think 3 favored draws would be enough to force a tie in the match. But yeah, he needs to start scoring something in this next game. Needs to start scoring something in this very next game, I would think, with the white pieces. Either a favored draw or a win is kind of needed for Niels. And we see Niels running off to take the 5-minute break. There is a 5-minute break between each game. Very important how they use it. Yesterday, the first 2 games, they each ran off and took their break immediately and made good use of it to, get a sip of water or eat a chocolate bar or run to the restroom, something like that. But today, but then there was one game yesterday where Shankland was obviously upset after the game and was clicking around, analyzing the game, trying to figure out what went wrong. And today also we see Shankland not looking upset, but also clicking around at the game a little bit after it finished, where the general suggestion, I think, of most chess professionals and coaches is once a game is done, if you've got more games to play that day, once a game is done, you need to leave it behind you, forget about it completely, just think about the next game. You can always analyze and revisit your games after a tournament or match or whatever is over. But to be clicking through it right then shows that, you're not making that immediate, very cold, dispassionate, emotional disconnection of a professional player. All right, and here comes game 2. Niels gets his first white of the day. He opens with e4. Shankland yesterday, after the 4 games, said that he thought he was getting bad positions against Niels's anti-Sicilian with d3 and g3, and that he was surprised by it, spitballed, and was unhappy with the positions he got. And now Niels is hitting him with another angle, obviously being aware that Shankland had prepared something for today. So the approach yesterday from Niels had been like d3, knight c6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, like this, right? A fairly normal, closed Sicilian, King's Indian attack Sicilian kind of position, right? So he knows that Shankland's been reviewing that last night, brushed up on something. He plays a different angle today, another unusual setup, and Shankland plays a slightly unusual move, b6. I don't know. Do you guys have any read on the body language, whether or not Shankland was surprised by b3 or prepared for b3? What do you people in chat feel? Because I have to watch the board sometimes. I'm not seeing the faces all the time. Queen e2, signaling that he may castle queenside in a moment. Niels could still play d4 in one go. He has not ruled out switching it from a closed Sicilian to an open Sicilian. He's got that flexibility, and Shankland has to play moves that would be good whether white plays d4 or d3. So he's gotta keep ready for both of those options. a6, preparing to play b5 if Niels castles queenside. Niels castles queenside. Shankland plays b5, and Niels says, all right, now we'll play an open Sicilian. You've played about 6 pawn moves with just 3 little pawns on the queen side. Let me open it up. And yeah, Shankland's got some work to do on his development, as is the case in most Sicilians, perhaps even more so in this one. But he comes with queen a5, looking for quick counterplay against the dark squares on the queen side. And he's lolling in his chair, looking a little bit relaxed, actually. And now Niels needs to calculate carefully because, you know, the concept was all well and good with his opening, but now he's got to be precisely ready for moves like bishop b4 and bishop a3 and make sure they don't whip up any kind of a storm against him. Queen d2 or d3 is definitely a candidate move, threatening d7, letting the f1 bishop out, defending c3. So these are definitely candidate moves for Niels. Okay, he's thinking. It can hurt a little to think sometimes when it's hard. Oh. Niels, by the way, playing from Sweden, so he's playing these matches in the evening. Shankland's playing them in the late morning, not too early for Shankland. For Niels, I guess it's probably about 8:30 p.m. now for the second game. So games 3 and 4, you know, it could be 9:30, 10:30. Not too late for most chess players. I think they arranged a time that works reasonably for both of them, so no one should be at a dramatic disadvantage or advantage, but you would think that in the very first game, Shankland might be a little bit tired, and because it's early, that might favor Niels in the very first game a little bit, and that by the last game, Niels might be a little bit tired. It might favor Shankland in the last game when Shankland is earlier in his day. All right, so rook h3, very creative idea from Niels. He gets the h-pawn going for some space, and he's able to support the c3 square with a new piece instead of continuing to move the queen. So very logical. He can also bring it over to d3 and just really go after that d7 pawn with a full Alekhin's gun. I mean, yeah. That'd be some major pressure on that file. And he's really highlighting how many more pieces he has coordinated than Shankland, as Shankland ponders the situation. I think Sam must be a bit uncomfortable here. But maybe I'm slightly overvaluing in this game and the last game the joy of the space and coordination for White in a Sicilian. One thing we can say is that even though these guys are both Najdorf players, Niels seems to be showing some serious respect for Shankland's theoretical knowledge by not going straight into the Najdorf as White. As well as with Black, and making it like a full-on 8-game Najdorf theme match. Or it might also mean that he thinks there's some gaps in Shankland's positional skills in these close Sicilians, although personally I don't think that Sam is very lacking positionally, so I don't think that's I think it's more likely that he's avoiding some opening prep than that he thinks that there's a weakness or any kind of a clear weakness in Sam's positional play. All right, after 2 minutes, Shankland says, you know what? Probably do need to do some development at some point if we're going to make a game of this. Against e5, he's got the move knight d5. And whenever you're considering kicking this knight, you have to ask yourself, you know, does the knight get kicked to a good square or a bad square? If it gets kicked to a good square, by which I mean like d5 or e4, then e5 is rarely that amazing. And if it gets kicked to a bad square like g8 or h5 or e8, then e5 is very, very likely to be a good move. So here, what do we expect Niels to do? He could go for g4, g5 to try and kick the knight without giving it the d5 square. That's the very, very plausible idea. The second idea for him would be to double the rook over here. And a third idea I've thought of is a4. Playing sort of the full board, defending a2, preventing bishop a3, attacking against these pawns while you have two rooks, queen. Every single piece comes to life if you trade that b5 pawn. So you could really imagine as White that you're putting tremendous pressure against Black with a4 starting a fight before Black's fully ready. And against b4, you might even have this very aggressive move, knight d5, plunking in the middle of the board. It's a classic thing in the Sicilians to just outpost a piece on d5. If Black takes, bishop e7, You can win back your piece with rook e3 or d6, I think, right? So black would have to play a move like king to d8 to keep the game going, and then maybe you play d6 to try and shut in those pieces. And we certainly have compensation for white, you know, and an interesting game still going. Foos was also thinking about knight d5 and wondering if king b1 would make it more effective. Wow, Niels hasn't moved yet. Okay, so this is his big concept is coming. I don't know that king b1 improves it that much. I feel like if you want to go knight d5, play a4. It softens up the c4 square, and then knight d5 comes with tempo because basically black answers your a4 move. If you go king b1, black's got to move for bishop e7 or something like that. It seems like they're preventing knight d5 more than you're improving knight d5. But with a4, we're threatening to take and take on b5 and just win a pawn in the endgame and a queen trade. And so black has a choice between b4, where you get knight d5 with tempo. All right, Niels has revealed. King b1 is his choice, like you, Foos. Or if black takes, you know, I feel like that's also great for white's pieces getting involved. So anyway, that's not the direction. He goes king b1 after 3 minutes of thought. I don't know that it does much. I would expect Shankland to move the bishop here, just believing in development. You got to go bishop e7 or bishop c5, something like that. Bishop a3. Maybe king b1 was played to answer bishop a3 with bishop a1. But I think surely we're going to see this bishop come out. I think one thing that can happen is once the bishop comes out, white can poke at the g7 square. And what that might look like is here and here and here. And do I need to take this? Yes, here and here. And I'm going to make queen g4, g6, h5. And yeah, it feels a bit worrisome for black. But in this particular case, I think there might be an immediate resolution for black with check. Oh no, the rook's covering that square. Okay. I was thinking maybe check, and you could take the e5 pawn and defend the king side. No, okay, so white's got it all covered with the rooks. I know, Foos. I convinced you of it as he played your move, right? I also still like my move better, you know, so who knows? Who knows? I mean, they're obviously the better players, so. King b1, b4 got played anyway, even without white playing a4. What do you know? And knight a4, not knight d5. Maybe the problem with the knight d5 ideas, Foos, was that black might not take with the pawn. Maybe black would take, do something like this, right? Just holding their structure together and contenting themselves with a single extra pawn. Maybe that's the refutation to knight d5, both in the game and in the a4 line that I suggested. And I used refutation in a gentle sense, right? It's not like white resigns. It's just what white maybe doesn't want. Slightly doesn't want, you know. A mild refutation. Okay, knight comes to a4. e5 from Shankland. Wow. Is he trying to just clip this pawn on e4 with his own king on the e file and rook e3 available? He looks very calm about it all. Like, yeah, don't look at me like I'm weird. You know. Right, that knight d5, that taking with the piece only works because the queen on a5 is covering the square then, yeah. Okay, so the obvious moves for white are rook c4 and rook d1. Rook d1, knight e4? f3? And you just take on e5? Or rook e3 first? I don't believe Shankland's going to take that pawn. I don't think that's the point. I think he's just going to develop more. Maybe he'll play d6 next move. and say that this knight can't get back to the d5 square. Yeah, he'll just set up a structure with d6 next move, I think. And say that none of white's pieces are well placed to play this d6, e5 structure, right? White's not outposting on d5. White's not playing like a3 or a4 like in the Sveshnikov to attack the queenside structure because the king's here. White might have to do that anyway. White might have to play something like rook back, d6. At some point you have to worry about your e-pawn, right? But basically a3 as the plan. Yeah, Nordovic, he found like an incredible move that surely was losing according to my instinct, but nor I, nor anyone in chat, nor Shankland could find the juice for white. And now Shankland's even, 3+ minutes ahead on the clock in this game. So I guess he's come up with a way to play it that bothered Niels. And I'm not impressed with that tempo spent on King B1 myself. Still not impressed with it. Game 6 right now of an 8-game match. Niels has done something. Rook back to d1. Standard move. But now, what's he up to? Is he tired from thinking about that? Is he not happy with what's going on? I think he's reviewing some variations he just calculated blindfold, going over them. My feeling is that Sam's just playing this little d6 move, but he could also play bishop e7 and save a tempo on it, right? Yeah, that probably even makes more sense. Just going bishop e7, looking at castling. You could play d5 in one move at some point once you're castled, maybe. One nice thing about a move like d6 is at some point you are threatening to take this pawn, and if you can make white play f3, I mean, the rook hates that, right? They'd love to see white spend a move on f3. It locks the queen out from the king side and the rook out from the center. So white's trying to do without that move. And if you could threaten knight e4, if you could get away with threatening it and getting white to commit to f3, you'd be very happy to achieve that as black. All right, so Shankland plays the more ambitious move, bishop e7. I guess the improvement, the refinement. Our first idea was he wanted to play d6, and then we came up with bishop e7. So he's saying you could still play d6 or d5 later. He's just playing a developing move, and he's asking white to again consider whether or not he's threatening knight e4. A desirable move here for white is rook g3 as soon as that bishop develops. That's kind of the closest thing to a question that white has that they can ask black. Against rook g3, there's also bishop e4 attacking c2. Hang on. We only looked at knight e4 here and didn't really believe it. But what about bishop e4? What was the plan there? I don't even know the next move for white after bishop e4. Sometimes I can't even find my way one move ahead, right? I can tell you, like, I'm calculating this move, for example, and then takes, rook takes, and black is up a pawn, plus ideas like, rook f2, rook c6, etc. So something like this is going to be, I don't know. Well, maybe Maybe it's mixed up enough and opening up enough that black can't hold it stable. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I hadn't appreciated. You don't have time for d6 because the rook's hanging, right? Maybe you could try this move. Yeah. All right, let's get back to the games. After bishop e7, rook e3 was played, defending the e-pawn, and Shankland goes h5, stopping any pawn storm. f3 played quickly, so now the rook's not stuck over there. But again, these pieces aren't getting to Sam's king very easily if it castles. So what Niels is doing is he's saying you're never going to be able to play d5 because you will always lose the pawn on e5 really, really hard. So he's trying to just freeze black and not let black make any more improving moves. Shanky just sets up the structure with d6. And, I mean, from his perspective, also, white's not doing very much, and black's pretty comfortable. There's no push coming here. These moves, I think a3 is going to be the move eventually for white. You could also move the queen, trying to put the bishop on c4, say that that's an improvement, but the knight's stuck, and there's always rook takes c4 tactic, right? So it's hard to think of exactly how we're going to set up the bishop on c4. Yeah. So d6. Oh, Niels has come up with something. What did he play? Queen e1. Hey. It was my move that I put on the board, even though I don't really have an idea with it. No, I think my idea is to play a3. I think ultimately that's the plan. What do you gain by playing a3? Well, you trade this pawn, freeing up the c pawn so you can reduce the pressure on this file in some ways. You also get the knight a square on c3 so it can get back into the game. You maybe get the bishop the square on a3 to pressure the isolated pawn. Shankland just castles. I bet we're going to see a3 here. That really looks like the move to me. In theory, there's also g4 as a pawn sack. Could be a move. I think the issue with a3 is calculating d5, so he can't play a3 quickly. Even if it's his idea, he's got to do some calculation to figure that out. You guys see the idea of d5 as we break in the center when we've got the threat here. Oh, but the queen's not defended, so we can never really take. So here. I mean, white might be able to hold on to this extra pawn here just fine. Okay, so Niels is thinking, I think a3 is possible. Rook takes a5 x-rays, David. Did I blunder? Yeah, I blundered the queen there. Okay, yeah, so this a takes b4 is a huge problem. There's no real move here for black after a takes b4. Nothing left, yeah. So it just doesn't work for black. There's no way we can arrange pawn takes a3. We just don't have enough juice. Niels is played, and it's a3. And Shankland just backs off, hitting c2, so as not to lose the pawn on b4. Yeah. So a3 was a strong idea for white. Now what does Niels want to do? Bishop c4, bishop d3, rook c1, rook d2, all plausible moves. Shankland working hard, even though it's his opponent's time. I can see effort on his face. The position is starting to put off some heat. That's true, Foos. It's not yet an explosion of everything hanging like the first game, but yeah, it's at a key point. Black definitely couldn't go for those d5 ideas. Niels gives the c2 pawn to gain squares for the pieces. Shankland's got a grab, and here we are. Controversy. Queen just gets the heck out of there before things get worse for her. Niels is a bit low on time, but it's not the end of the world. 3 minutes. He's still in the game. As he starts to take over the c file, he's got maybe knight b6 here. He'd have to watch out for bishop takes e4 after a rook trade. The doubled pawns aren't great, but black's got slightly bad pawns here. It's a bit of a question of activity with these two black pieces not yet getting over to the queen side, which is opening up. We got a rook trade, kind of positional. I think Niels is going to take this in a positional direction. I don't see him going for anything very sharp or slaughterous. I don't think that the game's headed towards any g4 moves, for example. At this point, I think it's headed for a fight over, which of these pawns are weaker, posturing for squares on the queen side as well as piece activity, like moves like knight b6, which is possible here, quite possible. Because now against bishop e4, there's knight takes c8. So you could go knight b6, rook moves, and then knight back to c4 if you wanted as white. You could play bishop c4 and then try to support the knight and bishop squares without hanging anything. Bishop c4 looks really pleasant, and he does go for it. Okay. Now, in theory, Shankland could he play d5? No, it's just white will just take a bunch of times on d5, winning the material. Okay. Nothing obvious that Shankland wants to do here, but he's come up with something. Rook c7, just getting out of the way of knight b6. Okay. Nothing dramatic. Covering the f7 square, getting out of range of knight b6, but, white can continue pressing a little bit here with queen e2, knight c3, bishop a3. There are some small improvement moves for white. I think it's like a small positional advantage for white, but pretty close to equal. And then the time advantage for Shankland. Overall, it's pretty balanced right now. You'd doubt you'd ever consider g4. I mean, if it were a position where you felt like your pieces were aiming towards the king side, g4 would be the break, right? But since there's action on the queen side and it's already open and there's already pieces there, I don't think they're ever going to switch sides. Right? It just doesn't make sense. You have to fight over the space that's open. You can't move all your pieces away from good squares to then open a different area of the board and start a new fight there. All right, Shanky brings the bishop back, opening up the threat on b4, and also he's got the idea of maybe playing bishop e6 at some point to challenge that bishop, and he wants to try and make white's king an issue. That's maybe like this little trump card that Shankland has here, is that he could potentially go after Niels' king in a lot of scenarios. It was a legit consideration several moves back, yeah. Before white played a3, basically, Foos, right? Anytime before white has played a3, it is an option to play on the king side. But I made the same judgment as Niels, which is the knight is badly placed here. It's kind of stuck. It doesn't have moves back. Eventually, black can go bishop c6, bishop a4, and hurt your king. So I basically thought, both his rooks are currently on the queen side of this pawn structure. His knight's already over there. His bishop's pointing there. The other bishop's there. Black's got two pieces that are a little bit stuck to the king side. It just made sense to play on the queen side, I think. Okay, so here we are. We got bishop a3 defending the b pawn, and Shankland does play bishop e6. I also, by the way, briefly considered rook c4, bishop e6, exchange sack. If you could win that pawn, it would be worth it, but after knight d5, I just don't see any way to make any sense of it. So bishop e6 gets played, going after these squares. White's probably going to trade on e6. I mean, probably already has, yep. And then the rook comes here to cover these squares. So Shankland's hoping to get at this king a little bit. He's going to need to not trade the rook or queen if he really wants to make white's king an issue. And I think he does. So I think we're going to see him wanting to play like rook b7 and d5 kind of moves at some point. But first, he just gets a few more things defended with the king tuck. Queen d2. From white's perspective, I think you want to move the knight and trade rooks. But if you move the knight, maybe the rook just goes to b7 and then your knight's on a worse square. So queen b7, so that's a move looking at the d5 square, I think. Also defending a6, you know, you might as well keep everything defended. Grandmasters generally do. King b2, maybe more defense for these 2 points with the king, but that bishop's now sort of stuck there. It's a little weird. Does Shankland have d5? This would be a time to use one of his 5 minutes. If he wants to go for this one. He could also just shuffle because of the match situation, right? I mean, he's up 6 points in the match, so he could play moves like rook c8, rook c7, rook c8, rook c7 quickly and just say, hey, Niels, like, you've got a minute on the clock. Can you come up with anything? Maybe at some point Niels would try g4 in that case still. Okay, he spent a minute on d5 and went for it. Just the recipe I was expecting. In general, this would make sense. If he weren't well ahead in the match, Shankland, I would definitely say use your time and try and take the advantage here with black with d5. It's only given his match advantage if you're really trying to just make sure you win the match. You could consider just shuffling and putting that pressure on your opponent. Like, hey, you're low on time. Can you come up with something? Make them feel like they're desperate. And they might actually blow it. You know what I mean? Like if you act like, yeah, a draw is good for me, it'll win me the match, then your opponent, they don't have a lot of time to consider it, and they go, oh, shoot, like I have to come up with something. And then maybe they do something that really hurts their own position. Okay, queen d3 played. Looking at some light squares. Shankland could play e4, trying to make a passer. d4, since he already has one. d4 is the move, so that's going after the b pawn, making room for this knight. Niels goes knight a4 and looks not impressed with his position. He's got the look if someone was like, yeah, I know it's bad. But I guess his idea is to go knight c5 to block off the attacks against b4. And Shankland, what does he have to do? Does he have to trade on c1 and grab the pawn right away? There's queen c4, knight d5, bishop takes b4. I think this would be a blunder to go for the pawn here. Bishop takes, right? The knight can't move, and if the queen does, she drops that. So he's calculating here. He's got his almost 4 minutes. If you take on b4 right away, you also lose a piece because of rook c7. So it's going to be maybe knight d5, allowing knight c5. No, he does go for the trade and then tries to work on the diagonal. So obviously no pawn a5 because of bishop takes on a3 check. That means white kind of wants to go knight c5 here anyway. And what does Shankland have in mind? Something like queen c6, building up tension on the c-file, probably. So he throws in the check first. Now Shankland has the option of queen d5 as well as giving way with the king. King, by the way, does not have great squares. King g6, there's always queen d3. You're not really heading anywhere. Niels shakes his head, though, like he's in real trouble. He's got 20 seconds left, and Shankland's using the time advantage nicely every now and then, doing some good thinking, playing non-standard moves. He seems to be slightly outplaying Niels this game. And yeah, he plays queen d5 like I expected. A very, very safe move for black, and likely what I would go for in this case. It seems like very high chance that you win the pawn. White has to try knight c5 without trading queens, exactly. Now, I'm not sure what the next move is. You could trade, play knight d7, trade again. Doesn't look amazing. He could trade and then move the knight somewhere random and just try and pick up the h4 pawn, but g3 is not so clear. Yeah. Nothing obvious. I don't think that black's winning or anything. Just slightly pleasant, and it's not clear how to do anything with that. Maybe he could trade twice on c4 and c5, leave himself the outside a pawn, and bring his king to attack that c6 pawn. So basically what I'm saying now is maybe you could go for like check here, trade here, here. The idea is to bring your king to c6, and then you're more or less winning. So I think white has to try and mess with you, and then try and mess with you. But it seems like they can successfully mess with you, right? The knight can't go anywhere. So the first impression is that that doesn't achieve anything amazing there. All right, Shankland makes the first trade. I think he might play something safer, like a takes b4, and just take it calmly. One very safe option. Oh, he does take on c5, though, which allows this c6 move. Now, this way, instead of king e8, his king's defending this pawn, and he's saying against c7, he's still got this. So maybe he just advances the a pawn and then slowly maneuvers the knight somewhere better. e4. Okay, so that's trying to improve the knight, basically. We get a trade. Shankland's playing it aggressively, but I think, Niels is holding the balance just fine, and the 3 extra minutes have evaporated while searching for an advantage. Knight heads to perhaps f5. Here against king e4, he can anchor the knight with g6, and this pawn is basically dead at some point. Against c7, he always has king here. He can put the pawn on a4, improving the position a little bit and stretching white's defenses. Yeah, maybe Shankland has found a small advantage with this approach. Yeah, and he just puts that pawn on a light square to keep it protected. At some point, he has to decide, does he want to go knight g3, king d4, knight f5, and take the h-pawn at the risk of letting the white king get loose? Answer is probably yes, but I would strengthen my position to the maximum first by playing a4, probably. But here Niels is implying he could maybe go king f4 if you don't take the pawns right now. Shankland still chooses to improve his position, says against king f4, he's got d3. King goes back to d3, and now it's like the maximum moment to take the pawn if you want to try to win. Also, it's sort of Zugzwang-y. Like, Sam has almost no other move other than to go for it, right? His king is boxed like this, yet tied to this. I guess knight e3 is the other move, because you've got knight c2. Knight e7, he goes for that pawn, and then shakes his head immediately, like, what a horrible blunder he's done. Oh, brutal. It is a horrible blunder. He resigns. The king and pawn ending is just lost instantaneously. Horrible. Just maybe didn't consider bishop e7 or something. I'm going to quickly show you guys why the resignation came, because it came so fast. But basically here, and he can't counterattack this c-pawn. And whenever white takes it and he attacks the c-pawn, the king's going to be able to come back and defend it. So Shanky just pushed just pushed really hard there. Once again, how bad would it have been if he had gone for these pawns? I guess the risk is his king's cut off and white just prepares to queen this pawn. And his knight just can't get across to defend the pawn either. So this was not like an obvious option as well. He didn't have a lot of options here. If he goes knight here, white can play some kind of a waiting move maybe. Yeah, not obvious what to do with black. So Sam's left still wondering about, the original question, like what should he have done in this situation here after knight c5, right? What's the best way to play that position? He definitely had safer ways to play it if he was focused a little bit more on just maximizing the match maybe versus maximizing game over game. He could definitely have tried to play the game safer. This position would be an obvious example of where he could have done that. He could have gone trades, and more or less any knight move. But one that I was thinking of was this one. White king comes here. But, because Shankland has this, he should basically never lose this endgame where he can target those kingside pawns, right? This would be a very, very safe approach to the position. Right? He can always come back like this. It's hard to make any progress for white. Maybe black's even still better in some scenario. I don't know. It's not detailed analysis, but that's what's up. By the way, folks, they're on a 5-minute break. We see Shankland again staying at his computer, looking at the game, with that competitiveness that he's got. I think hurting him a little bit here, feeling like emotional, really wanting those wins so much. They've now played 2 of the 4 games for today. And the match is more or less tied at this point, right? We've got a 1-point lead for Sam Shankland. He's got 1 more win than Niels, but Niels has 2 favored draws. So, yeah, we'll see if he can get another good position out of that same opening line or if Niels varies it up. And now Niels gives him the main line e5 move instead of e6 like in the first game. So I think that suggests that Niels didn't like the position he had in the first game, which I read their body language as Sam liking the position, Niels not liking it. I liked it for white. I don't think it's because Sam could have prepared something new during one of those 5-minute breaks. Niels probably saw that Sam didn't look like he was energetically preparing. You can kind of tell from his face that he was just sort of despondently looking at the previous game and how he didn't win it. So I think Niels is just saying like, hey, that position was bad. I'm just going to try my luck with something else here. And Sam gives us a positional variation of bishop e3. The sharper variations, so to speak, are knight b3 with f3 and g4 and an English attack, right? Pawn storm on the king side. Niels would play a move like h5, probably, and you would still get a sort of positional version of the English attack, but Shankland plays this knight f3 move, which I don't love. And Niels plays the move I like for black, queen c7 here against it, preventing white from putting the bishop on c4 now that this square and diagonal are weaknesses, right? Shankland has told me he doesn't think queen c7 is the best move when I've explained to him why I think queen c7 is the best. And he's always right and I'm always wrong, but this one I have a hard time. Sometimes I'm slow to take the lesson. It still looks like a great move to me, this queen c7 move order. And yeah, I know one of the main things white does against it is like a4, a5. as Sam has started doing, and bishop b6, getting this tempo, and the queen goes to c6. And I don't think it's a problem myself, but there comes that a4, a5 plan from Shankland. Niels plays b5 immediately. We get this trade. Pawn on a6 is hanging, but black would play knight c4 at the end with good... Oh, no, it's defended still. Never mind. Okay. So, in any case, black's threatening knight c4. White covers it with knight d2, playing pretty quickly. Bishop b7, looking at the pawn. You'd want to go like f3, but then d5 comes. I think that looks very fine for black. I know Shankland has a slight difference of opinion with me and thinks that there's something for white in this line, whereas I think this line is lame for white. It looks like he's trying to figure out what it could be because he believes it's there. I personally just don't believe it's there, and I think black has equalized at this point. Basically just trying to play d5, and I don't see how white stops that. What could it be? I guess white would have to trade here and play knight c4. But man, the dark squares. Knight b3 to a5 would be nice if the pawn weren't hanging. Yeah. Also, when you go knight b3, black can go knight c4 themselves, right? Even if they can't take your pawn. And they're attacking here and stopping knight a5. So then you take, and they take, and you go here, and they back up. And now you haven't done anything too special, right? You just traded some pieces. And it's maybe a minute advantage for white, but not tremendous, nothing crushing, to my mind. I mean, I would concede you've got like a tiny preference for white. Easy grind. Well, no, the grind's not that easy, Fisher, because you got to pay like your tempi on this kind of stuff. If I gave you enough moves to go bishop g5, bishop f6, b3, then, and knight d5, I guess, because even there I could go queen c7, knight d5, queen c2. So if I give you 1, 2, 3 moves, then I would agree that you've got an easy grind, like basically a nearly winning, like a winning positional advantage. But you're pretty far from doing that, I think. Sam, by the way, does play bishop b6, the move I said he would have to do, followed by knight c4. I said if he has something, he's gonna think it's here. Idea is that we have to prevent d5 if we have anything for white. But as I said, when I introduced this idea, I the dark squares, and we have to defend this pawn, right? So I don't know that we can finish this knight e3 bishop c4 maneuver with the pawn hanging. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe there's maybe this variation could work for white. Niels thought for a bit before playing queen c5. I mean, I put the queen on c7, but yeah, it could be either of these moves. He thought for almost 2 minutes, so I think he was wondering whether white would be able to play knight c4 to e3, or whether white would have to spend a move defending. So Shankland defends. Wants to get in all these moves, and the bishop's so bad. I don't believe this. I mean, Shanky, if you think this is good for white, you're just going to have to call me an idiot for not getting it. But I don't think Niels is going to believe you either. I think Niels probably thinks this position's okay. Oh, he makes some big eyes like he just saw something important. Fisher Seb says white might be able to play b4 with the idea of queen b4, rook b1, queen c5, rook takes b7, and Grandelius spends a move off on the queen side, gaining space and preventing it. Also introducing bishop a6. But you know, his dream was probably something like d5 or rook d8 with d5. So a sign that Fischer said was probably right, that he didn't like b4, even though, you know, b4 queen c7 is technically playable. It's not like b4 is an immediate knockout, just a space grab. Rook d1 from Shankland, that's what he wants. So Niels cannot play d5 anymore. He doesn't control it. So if he wants to play it, he's got to go rook d8, as he does. And now white has knight e3 maybe. Against knight e3, black has the idea of bishop a6, trading bishops, and queen b4, attacking these two pawns. Just show it real quick. Normally you're not in a hurry to trade that bishop, right? So you'd only do this if white couldn't handle this. But I think after knight d5, white's more than handled it, right? Like, they've handed black a loss, so that counts as handling things. So yeah, so bishop a6 is bad strategically, and it looks like it's also just not the move here tactically. So knight e3 gets played by Shankland. I don't like bishop a6. He seems to be preventing d5 for the moment, although it could also be played as a pawn sack. Maybe a little risky if white trades two minor pieces before putting a pawn there. d5 takes. Here's my feeling. Here, 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 here. And I don't think black has enough compensation if all those pieces get traded off. So I have to look, because it's like a classic thing that once your opponent has finally set up every piece ready to go into d5, you just sack the pawn before they can get there. Yes, he is dose is dose. So what are the other things you can do here as black? You know, g6, bishop f8, not thrilling. I think bishop a6 is not good. Queen b6 is kind of just puttering around. A rook could go to c8. Somehow it feels like Niels is a little bit worse here, which didn't make sense. Okay, Fischer says this maybe queen b4 could be something, but queen b4, you're not threatening to take on b2, right? So if you go queen b4, white could do a number of things, including like rook a4. Just kicking you back, right? And then this is coming, and this is coming back to haunt a5. Never worse than a Najdorf. Okay. It's good to know. I mean, I almost feel like that. I do feel very comfortable in playing the Najdorf. At the same time, I don't know. They're in bad positions. Niels had a terrible one in the first game today, I think. Like, quasi-terminal. But saved it. Saved it. Low on time, but saved it. Wow, rook a4, bishop e4. I did not anticipate that for sure. White has queen takes e4 there, Fischer said, I think. I mean, I didn't see any of this coming, but it's a funny tactical idea. So if white takes here, Fischer said takes here, hitting things, and then you collect the rook. But here you can go queen e4. Knight e4, rook b4, knight c3, hitting more things. Oh my god. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, hell, Cole, cars didn't have wheels till somebody thought of them. You're right. Najdorf is unbeatable. All right, you've got a religion to you, Chessful. You've got a whole religion. Niels is deep in the tank here. Goes down a couple minutes on the clock compared to Shanky Panky. And puts a rook on c8. Yeah. It was on my radar, but yeah, I'm not pumped about it either, Niels. Just like you, I'm not pumped about this. Okay, but are there easy moves for Shankland? F3 is worrisome for the knight. Queen c4, you can just back up to b6. Queen b5, you can trade the queen and grab the e-pawn. You don't really want to tuck the bishop on f3 and lose control over c4. It's my favorite opening too, Chesspool, so I'm not opposed to you. I mean, it's Neil's favorite opening, Sam's favorite opening, my favorite opening. It's many people's favorite opening. You just had that fanatical tinge. Rook A to c8. I play it without prep, Fisher Seb. Like, the thing about the Najdorf is there are tactical players who like it and positional players who like it. There are opening theory hounds who like it and people who don't use opening theory who like it. It's one of the most popular openings and appeals to a wide range of people. Rook A4 from Sam. Just covering the e-pawn some more and c4. Preparing doubling if needed. Yeah, that move does everything he wants. It's a good move. Ay. Every time either of these people plays a move, it's... Well, not every time, but very often when one of these players plays a move, it's so good it changes my evaluation of the position each time they move, you know, and I can't see what their opponent's going to do until they come up with it. But this move is nice. By defending the pawn, I think like one dream is to just go queen b5. Take the game towards an end game. The overall dream is if this bishop could ever get to c4 and then d5 or b3 or something, white would just take over positionally, right? Black's dark squared bishop would remain bad, which it already is, and the d6 and a5 pawns would remain bad, which they already are, but white would solve their only issue, which is making use of this bishop. Can one play the dragon without prep? Yes, but expect to get wrecked. The opening's not as good as the Najdorf. You can play that dragon, just expect to get wrecked. G6. A simple little positional move that does not seem to immediately prevent queen b5. Maybe Niels would sack the exchange if Shanky went for it here. Niels kept some time on the clock there. He didn't agonize too much about this g6 move that does almost nothing. Maybe this would be the idea, but it's not easy to believe, is it? It's not like easy to believe. I mean, it's not instantly dead lost. Maybe that's where black is at. G6 played, Shankland thinking. Working. I think he's forgotten about the loss in the last game and he's just playing now. At least me personally, I just feel like the aura of a strong player thinking. All right, what did he do? Queen d2. Staying in the middle game. Looking at bishop c4. Or rook c4 in a rook trade. Boop! Get back, you fiend. Is that what you think about when you play the Najdorf chess fool? You think about what to have for dinner because you know you already can't lose. Your opponent already fell into the Najdorf. Two can play at the get back, right? Get back, get back. Fischer Seb wants to give that exchange. Is the B pawn at all threatened? Oh, Shankland thinks so. I was just wondering about that pawn. Because I was thinking about, well, what is the situation if white comes into d5 now, right? Like, what's the situation? And I thought, well, takes. Whoops. Takes is the situation, right? Like, you can't do that. Actually, maybe you can. You could go like here, here, here. Oh, wow, this move saves black. Nice move. Back rank. Okay. Right, so Shankland just defends the B pawn, which is the question I was asking myself, after looking at knight d5 for a moment. King g7. King gets tucked. No back rank mates, not even back rank checks. No back rank anything. No shenanigans allowed, says Niels. And now Shankland could definitely just plunk on d5 if he wants to. It looks highly playable. Yeah. He could plunk everything on d5. Very playable. Basically, you just play a better opposite colored bishop middle game. It's pretty tough for black, yeah, to my mind. The knight d5 move here, and there's other things too. Fischer Seb might sack on c6 and go bishop c4. Someone might go rook a1. Rook a1's the choice. Chessful thinks that Granddaddy Delicious is doing just fine here. But Chessful, let's just look at this position for a second. We come here, hitting your stuff. You trade, we come again. You trade, we come again. I mean, you must know these positions are a bit worse for black, or significantly worse for black, right? Because white's bishop can target something, and the a-pawn is also weak. This is not an equal position or a fine position. This one here. This is just like a known plus. It is known. Maybe you grovel with this move, huh? He can always draw this. Okay. Shankland's still keeping a noticeable time advantage this game. It's a big old Sicilian match here. Backs up. So the idea is that this tags the e-pawn, right? Because there's the idea of trading rooks and then taking the pawn. So Shanky could maybe move away to keep that defended. Maybe move the bishop up to defend this pawn more with the idea of recapturing on c4 with the knight. Eventually maybe venture f3, but that's the really scary one. Right? Like you go f3 and get into this kind of stuff. We have to say that doesn't look good for white, right? Okay, rook c4 is not really a threat yet, says Fischer Seb, of course, because knight c4 comes with tempo. So Shankland has a pretty free hand here. He could go bishop d3, he could bring the rook over here. He could play g3. Oh, he doesn't want to yet, huh? No, too soon. King f1, maybe. Gets out of back rank mates and gets off the diagonal. If he goes rook c8, knight c4 himself directly, does that allow him to grab the a pawn, or is the e pawn too hanging? Sam ponders. Takes, knight c4. Queen c7. Then f3. Okay, Fisher Sub says maybe trade rooks, knight c4, queen d4. Just going after this pawn like crazy. Bishop d3. You take because of this. I'll just show you the variation, folks. This has not happened. Shankland's in a deep think. Queen d4 with the idea of trying to win this pawn. Right? And if you go bishop d3, I was thinking maybe black can just take anyway. Oh no, it's fancier than that, but it's good. It's good, folks. In this position, I think the right move for black is rook takes c4, removing the knight that's defending the queen. Yeah, now the bishop can't take because it drops the queen, so the pawn has to take. Then you hit white with this, because both of these pieces are busy interfering with these tactics, and now you just busted. You know, just busted. Whoo! That's a nice move. That's a nice move. I'm going to clip this position for my database of puzzles. Okay, Shankland's made a move. Let's see what it was. Bishop f3, holding these squares. But it's not where the piece likes to be, you know. It doesn't love it. Doesn't love it. All right. All right, Niels, 2 minutes left, but he hasn't really thrown ever, despite being in serious time pressure in many of these games, has he? I don't recall Niels throwing a single thing. I mean, I guess there was the one wild game where he got a favored draw, but for a moment Shankland got up 3 pawns against 1. The third game yesterday, I think, where he pushed his d pawn to d7, then recaptured on d7 with the wrong piece when he won a piece. That was the only game where maybe he made some kind of slip in time trouble there, yeah? Overall feel of the match so far, as far as how the scoring system has affected things, it really injected a lot of interest, Dripman, in one endgame yesterday, where it was 3 against 1, but like a clear draw, because the person with 3 pawns was too passive and couldn't even get their pieces up to defend the pawns. But there was this interesting fight, like, can the person who's got 3 on 1 hold 2 of the pawns and get a favored draw? Or are they going to drop 2 and it'll be an equal draw? And in the end, like, they tried so hard to hold 2-on-1 to have the favored draw that they dropped all 3 and the other player got the favored draw. And so it was a scenario where in a normal chess game, the players would just shake hands knowing that there's no way for either player to win. But instead, they were fighting over, these squares and who can or can't win a pawn, and it created this whole extra sort of like interesting phase of the game. So that was one cool thing. But no, we've seen another thing we've seen is twice we've seen Grandelius like cleanly transition from trying to win a game, like recognizing the moment that he can no longer win the game, and instead play for just like a favored draw, like just try and get up a pawn and hold that position. So he's done that nicely, and it's been interesting to see. Overall, it's been a fantastic match. I don't know how great a match it would have been with a normal scoring system. Probably also a decent match, but I feel, me personally, Dripman, I feel an extra layer of tension. Like, there's this thing for GMs and sometimes even for IMs where you're in a position where you're within the margin of a draw and you kind of know that you can't push your opponent over the edge and that they can't push you over the edge, and there's like a little bit of relaxation that can come in there. But now it's that extra edge. Like, to me, all the end games are a little bit more interesting, I think, where like at any moment it's like, oh, but what if they like push just a little bit here and take over and then I'm disfavored, That's my personal take, is that it's just added some interest in these endgames. All right, so G3 gets played now that the king and bishop can tuck there. Grandelius holds the C file, holds everything together for now. And he's got a minute against 4. And he's just doing fine. He's just doing fine, actually. Even though it looked like he was slightly worse, we're not seeing... With Sam's bishop over on G2, I mean, it's just, there's not an advantage for white that I can see. The bishop on E7 is still bad. I mean, it must still be like a minute advantage for white, but I just don't see practically how to improve things anymore with this bishop here. You did tell me, Chessful. I mean... I don't think the Najdorf has lost a game yet in this match, really. What was game 4 yesterday? I mean, Shankland won game 4 yesterday. It might have been in a Najdorf. Let's see. I'm just going to check real quick. I'm sorry that I can't remember every single game every time. I feel like I know them, but... Okay. Oh, he was playing Magnus Carlsen today in Blitz before this match? Look at that. Lost, though. I don't like to lose right before a match. Okay, the game that he won yesterday... Right, it was not a Najdorf. You think Shankland played a titled Tuesday? Oh, and maybe lost to Magnus in the last round on board 1 or something, huh? I always forget about titled Tuesday because it's so boring. All right, so game here. We're getting a rook trade. So Niels didn't play the Najdorf in that game, in that 4th game yesterday. So the Najdorf has been played like 3 times this match without losing a game. That's its score so far. All right, Shankland goes after A5. Bishop A6 trying to hold it. Pokes the rook off the C file. He's going to then probably come back to F1, but maybe knight G4? Nah. This is game 7, Galrav, exactly. 2 games left to play. It's a 1-point match right now, and a win is 5 points, so a 1-point lead is very, very little. Rook D8 looking to play D5. What does Shankland come up with? He grabs the pawn, right, because he kicked the rook off of C3. So now black needs counterplay, and when you need counterplay, you just play the aggressive move. Shankland says, sure, let's trade the knights as well so I can play C4. If he played pawn takes, then after bishop b4, this is a typical thing where which sucks for white. So he takes with the knight, allows knight e4, and grabs a pawn over here. Niels needs a lot of counterplay now because now he's down a piece in this endgame. But there's opposite colored bishops, and Shankland's knights are far afield, so it could happen. Anything could happen. Got to save the bishop from knight takes h3 check. At least knight c5 isn't possible right now. I think I would go here, keep the knight from going to e4. I don't know what could be wrong with that. Goes to f1, sure, who knows? Not I. Not at this speed. Shankland's got 3 minutes to try to play this well. I think his knight on a5 is going to move here, back towards the middle. Trying to get that rook out of the second rank. Leave this knight here. You cannot allow bishop c5. Rook d1, pinning. So that's why the bishop didn't go to g2, to avoid that. Now his king has the g2 square, I guess. And it will go there immediately. And, I mean, his rook could be improved, that's for sure. Maybe c3 is a good move. This is the kind of position where I lose all the time in blitz games with a full extra piece, but I feel like Shankland will kind of easily reveal some technique to us here. To me, c3, letting the rook into the game. Yes, I got one move right. All right. This, yeah, annoying. Hadn't really seen it coming, but Niels shakes his head despondently like it's not that good. And Shankland brings this knight towards d5. He could have also gone through c7, I imagine. The e-pawn moves kind of hopelessly. The pawn plods forward hopelessly. Knight d5, poking the bishop, and then maybe bishop e2, consolidating. And there's the resignation, and I think that clinches the match, actually, because they're so close to the end. They're going to play the 8th game in a moment no matter what, or well, in 5 minutes no matter what. But that is a full 5 points for Shankland. He's now up 6 points, and if Niels wins the last game, it would just be 19-18. So, yeah, a huge turn there in that time scramble. Fisher Seb thinks it was a fantastic game by Sam. I guess it was. I guess he managed to keep some pressure on that game throughout. Let's check while they're taking their 5-minute break. Let's just check the decisive phase right here, right? Where Sam won a pawn and then Black ended up sacking a piece in the complications here. Let's just look at this 2-move stretch here and see what really decided the game. I mean, maybe this was a case where Niels having 20 seconds actually proved to be a bit of a problem for him here. But you notice Sam didn't like try to flag him off the clock playing quickly. Sam just kept playing his game. He didn't try and play especially trappy or anything. He just played normal. And then at some point, the game is tense enough that if you're low on time and your opponent's playing well, you might make a mistake. So here he goes knight c4. He's going after the a pawn with the idea of rook a5. Black can't take. Or could they? Takes. Doesn't allow d5. Knight e4, d5 was kind of like the blunder that first came to mind. But bishop e4 and you keep control of d5. So black can't take. They can't play d5 either. White will just take with the knight first to not allow bishop b4 stuff. And get this position. Maybe there's, a little bit of counterplay and hope here for black, but oh no, c3 even, right? White's certainly very, very comfortable here collecting pawns. So it's hard to see the counterplay for black here to cover this pawn. Maybe it's just keep defending with rook a8. We've finally seen the Najdorf lose, so I don't know if Chess Fool will dematerialize or will hop in and explain to us what black should have done to keep holding the balance here. I mean, I guess with rook a8, there's some danger that white could go knight b5 and plop a knight on d6 here. So he's still under pressure. He goes bishop a6. The idea is if you take with the rook, he trades the knight and wins this piece. If you take with the knight, he takes on c3. And Sam just pokes the rook off with bishop h3. And we've gone through the whole We've gone through the whole 5-minute break without getting to the bottom of it. So that tells you how hard it is to keep up with these players. But it seems like Sam won a pawn there, and the counterplay with d5 wasn't sound and just hastened the defeat. But, you just, when you're down a pawn, you can feel a little bit more in like desperation mode. All right, so Shankland plays e5 for the first time this match. Previously, he played 3 Sicilians himself. Grandelius had played 3 anti-Sicilians. And now we get a Berlino. Game 8 does affect the prize fund, as the organizer and sponsor, Vyacheslav Rutar, is telling us in chat. Out of the $5,000 prize fund for the match, $2,000 is apportioned based on win/favored draw percentage, right? So there's $2,000 to the winner, $1,000 to the loser, but there's also $2,000 divided among the total wins and favored draws. So still a lot of money on the line here, as well as, just, you're a chess player. You just go into your fighting mode no matter what. You know what I mean? For those of you who are also chess players, you just switch on the mode where like you're trying to win the game or draw the game if you can't win it at all costs, right? And there's nothing else in the world but that. And that's the motivation. So here they are, game 8, close match. For today, it's been 1 equal draw and 1 win apiece. So if Niels gets the upper hand in this game, he'll have also had the upper hand on day 2. Yeah, Google en passant, we can ask Shankland and Grandelius their thoughts on that after this last game when they come and talk to us about the match, because they have thought about that question when they prepared for the match, right? There are some openings that might be a little bit better or a little bit worse for white or black based on the repetitions that exist in opening theory. This move hilariously allows knight e6, threatening mate in 1. I suppose Shankland would just play bishop d7 in response and just not care. In classic Berlin style, black just has a terrible position and claims they don't care. Niels threatens checkmate. Shankland blitzes out this. He's deep in opening theory. You can see him. He's not even yet having to recollect the opening theory that he struggles to remember. He's still just playing the opening theory that he knows 100% cold. Not even thinking yet. All right, and now he's going to think. There we go. 18 moves in. This is, to me, the the worst issue with chess is 18 memorized moves right now. That's what I personally am most up in arms about. But let's see. So black's trying to break that light squared pawn structure of white's to free these 2 minor pieces. It's a little bit hard to do. In the meantime, also, it's hard for black to organize the king, the bishop, any of these pieces. So Shankland just makes space to untangle. If the bishop moves, then it'll be on a better square. The king will be able to move, etc. Oh yeah, good point, Chessful. I agree with you. Foo's chess wondering about knight c5 here. I would guess, Foos, that black just plays this and just repeats, Just says, well, you can't mate me just yet, so we'll just go back and forth. The other thing that black can do here, instead of c5 from Shankland, is you can trade and then come for this file, right? The issue is, you're a little worried about these pieces not being developed. And I guess white goes here to hold you out. You go here threatening this. White comes here. You come here. And then at some point, white's just going to develop. And you can't go fight the whole game with this one rook, right? Too much development for white. They're going to come here and poke this pawn. They're going to go rook h1. And we're just not coordinating the black pieces. So I think I prefer this c5 move as played by Sam. And that gives him room to put the bishop and the king here. The rook is a little bit dissuading this g5 breakthrough. What should white do to try and put some pressure on black? Rook e1, bishop h6, a4, a5. I think a4, a5, black's too strong there. You're attacking black where they're fine. If you want an advantage, you have to get at these squares with your pieces pretty soon. Bishop f4, which allows just bishop c6 for now. The reason I thought of a4 was to maybe go knight b5 to coordinate with this bishop. Both still playing very quickly. Where do you want this knight? I mean, I guess e4 at the moment, but bishop c6 is dealing with it. Alternatively, I mean, e6, you could bother black if you got your knight to e6. That would be a good outpost. You'd have to go through e2, f4. Knight e2, knight g3, knight h5. There's a few options for the knight. I mean, I guess these are the more obvious squares you'd want to be at. d5 also, but I think basically bishop c6 makes it hard to use those two central squares. So in theory, we've got an opposite colored bishop ending where white's got a pawn majority on the king side, which is far away from the black king. So it's a mildly threatening pawn majority. And black's pawn majority is not threatening. So that's that small edge for white. And I guess black's argument is just to hold the balance anyway, you know. Just to have well enough placed pieces to keep white from making progress on the king side, and you know, have opposite colored bishops as a blockading recourse eventually. So all right, rook d2. So this could come here, but I think the bishop's coming here anyway. Maybe it's coming over somewhere else. I don't know. Shankland rouses himself to deal with this idea after a short break. Now, I'm pretty surprised the bishop hasn't yet gone to c6, but maybe there's some issue with the e6 square. You know, maybe he doesn't want to give it up too soon. Get a trade over here. And rook g7. I was going to say, don't tell me he's going to play rook g7 and still not, you know, get this stuff defended. So the big question is g5 takes f6. Rook here. Here. g8. Oh, and if rook d1, there's this. So, like knight e4, knight d5, there's this now. Okay, so that's the key calculation. Is g5, f6. Other moves for white, rook g1 is not very exciting from white's perspective. Maybe rook h1. Rook h1, rook g4, rook h8, rook g8 though. Yeah, I don't think that is sound here and here. Right? Because black can block this way. And rook here, giving up this bishop with check is a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, at minimum, black plays rook d4 next move. So, Sam working on Niels' move now, trying to predict what's coming. Looks like there's more or less just rook g1 and g5 as candidate moves, and my g5 calculation didn't look super promising. We can double check it. g5 takes. We just practice calculating like these guys for a moment. Push. Rook f7. Bishop takes. Knight g8. Rook f1. Knight f6. No, king f1. Knight f6. Rook f2. Okay, I found a slightly better line for white. I think maybe it goes here, 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 takes, here, and now this move. I think this is the only square to go to with the king in order to have this tactic ready. Oh, but black always has check. And we have to go and allow one of these moves. Ah, refuted. I think a move was just played, so let's see what it was. Rook g7, rook ad1. Yeah, he's just going to play bishop c6. Whoa, Sam hits him. Did you see Sam thinking while Niels was thinking on rook d1? He was thinking for 2.5 minutes, but this time Sam was like this on his opponent's time. Oh la la. And now he walks away. That's an I know you're going to be thinking for a bit. Goodness gracious. Okay, so moves for white, who's up a rook at the moment. Bishop here. Rook here. Let's just put some moves on the board. So takes, 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 takes. Looks very safe for black, right? Yeah, very safe. Like drawish, but safe. Okay. Other alternative. Bishop here. King here. Now this is hanging. Okay, that's not going to do it. Rook's double. Rook f4 check. Black's lucky to have a6, right? Because otherwise, you kind of attack the king. So here Shanky has bishop and 2 pawns against rook. The rooks are weirdly not that useful in here in his position. Maybe he needs more than that. Maybe he needs the knight, coming into the game. Rook f8. There's rook f4 to f5. Bishop g3, king a8. Yeah, anything other than saving the rook is obviously not good for white. So the only thing to really consider is, is there any good use of this rook? He's going to want to keep rooks on the board. As black, you avoid that trade like the plague. Check him. And now you could play f5 to hold your pawn, or you could just go into his pawns, and black's good. I think Sam's move is sound. I know you guys expected it to be sound based on him having thought for a while, predicted it, and played it. Rook f8 gets played. Capture, wander. I think here it's good to take on f5 without throwing in rook f3 check, but rook f3 check is not bad either. I guess the king would go to d2. Yeah, let's not send the king to d2. I go rook f5 right away. He gives the check. Wrong again. More than sound, I'm scared for white. No, it should be pretty equal. Fischer said it's bishop and 2 pawns against rook, which importantly in this match is equal material. Technically, it's not just an exchange sack with an equal position and compensation. It's an exchange sack that's also exactly equal pawns on the board as far as, you know, scoring any draw they might agree to if they start repeating here, or if they trade a couple more pawns evenly, or if somebody offers a draw. Right now it would be a 2-2 equal draw that we would be talking about here. We're in the last game of the match, folks. This is it. Rook g1 played. Yeah, rooks need open spaces. Stopping knight g6. As black, I'd want to play b5, b4 really quickly here to get space for my knight, but rook g7 is coming too fast. The knight doesn't really have anywhere good to go. He's going to throw in the check, send white's king to c1, but now if he goes knight f5, white always has rook f6, right? If you go through d5, you're sort of simplifying a little bit, but he might have to play knight d5 because I don't see much else to do against white's plan of rook here, kicking the knight and breaking in. Just don't see this knight getting anywhere good faster than that. Okay. Shankland doesn't either, and he's playing it pretty quickly, so he probably thinks he's okay here. He didn't agonize about it in any way, or maybe he just saw quickly that there weren't really any other choices. So I don't know that white's going to try to avoid this trade. I mean, technically, they might have this move knight e4, but knight e4, you're really setting yourself up for some raging counterplay from black, I think. c3, and the knight would be trapped on a2, but it's anything but trapped on d3. Yeah. Probably as white you're trading, but Shanky's point is he's just clearing up some space so that as white goes after his stuff, he can clean up white's pawns. And in a normal chess game, you would just want to hoover off any white pawns so they don't have enough to ever win. But here as black, you could even be trying to create a favored draw if you're able to win an extra one of these pawns with this attack here, right? Here, check. If the king goes this way, you get a back rank mate. And if you force the king out instead with king here, and then you take this pawn, now a scenario like this, you have a favored draw as black, right? Bishop and 3 pawns. Because the pawns are doubled, you might not be able to win this. If they weren't doubled, you would just win the endgame with 3 pawns. But here, basically, as black, you just hold your position, and it's a favored draw. You know, you just, whatever, you know, put the pawn here and the bishop here, and go back and forth with the bishop, and it's a favored draw, so you score 3-1 against the opponent. I'm posting Fooz's comment for him there in the chat. Knight d5. Niels has traded it and cut off the move bishop e4. Note that if you go f5, bishop e4, white can still take it. Oh, can they? Yeah, you don't have rook e1 or anything. No. Yeah, okay. It's not right now, Fisher Seb. It's a straight 3 points for the bishop and for the knight. But certainly if one wanted to call the bishop 3.1 points or something like that, or 3.15 or whatever, you know, any number a little bit higher than 3, then suddenly bishop and 2 pawns against rook is not going to be an equal draw. It'll be a favored draw to the bishop. You know, any equal endgame with bishop versus knight will be a favored ending, a favored draw for the bishop without it having to prove its superiority. In a sense, you'd increase the bishop's value just by valuing it more, right? Because then people would want to have the bishop left at the end of the game to get that extra that extra favored status. What's Shankland going to do about rook e1? He's having a think. He's got plenty of time to get to the end of this game. No worries there. White's plan is to go rook e7 at some point. Can Shankland take on a2? It seems no. Bishop a2, b3, a5, king b2. If he plays a5, I guess white will play a3. Shanky takes. Good lord. Oh, he's going to play c4, not a5. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Venceslav has thought about the idea of ranking the bishop above the knight. Niels staggered by the famous Bobby Fischer blunder. Bishop takes a2. And the point is b3, c4 to dig the piece out. And, well, as I said, the importance of grabbing a pawn in an endgame like this, even if white has enough activity to hold the game, if Shankland can get to a favored draw, you know, he's going to increase his payoff here, or his standings in the match, or if it were a tournament, etc. So grabbing this could be worth a lot. Niels has to work on this now. b3, c4 looks downright unpleasant for white to me. I mean, there's nothing I like about that position from white's perspective. I don't like letting black take. I don't like pushing past and letting black do this to my king. I just don't see how to play anymore there. I don't like trading and letting the bishop free and letting the a-pawn go, and black's pawn structure is so compact. I'm still far from winning this f-pawn or this c-pawn. There's really no scenario I like after this move. You know, often you would try and do a thing where when they take, you push past, but it just comes in queens. You can't do anything fancy. They're playing a flurry of moves now. b3, c4, rook e3, trades. So white holds in the bishop, but you can see Sam's got the bishop well defended with the second rank open, and there's not much that white can do from here. Sam can also at will give a check and try and bring the bishop out through b1. So reasonable moves for Sam here are a5 and f5, I think. And he goes with a5 first, just saying, hey, the pawn sticks here where I can always keep attacking it. I'd expect something like this rook to come to f7 or something. But if it does, there's a4. So he's also preventing the most obvious move for white, rook f7, setting up rook here or here or here. So maybe white's going to go rook c3 now. Yes, got it. Okay, so now maybe white's threatening rook f7. So Shanky could play c5 himself. He is a player who's always playing aggressive moves. I think I would go for it. He does. Okay. So the idea is now if you attack the king, it can go this way. Most importantly, this is now the underbelly, and this rook is a long way from attacking it. This one here, you know, can bother you and get to it. But for this one here to go rook e3 and e6 as well with this pawn hanging, it's going to be a little bit tough. So the position's looking pretty grim for Niels. Is rook c2 a draw? I guess black might check and then try and escape here. Rook c2 is a very good question, though. And he tries it. So options for black are rook f1, check, bishop b1, rook c1, right? Or trade rooks and play something like c4 or a4, right? But this does force the rook trade, which is huge for white. I don't see a way out, completely out of any rook trade. In fact, it looks like he even manages an equal trade because the f-pawn is hanging. I don't even see right now a way for Sam to force the favored draw, which I was starting to think was a real risk for Niels. Sam looks, yeah, like maybe he didn't fully look at this move when he played c5. Feels like it's going to peter to an equal draw, you know, something like rook takes, king takes, c4 is what I'm sort of predicting. And Sam seems to resign himself to it without wasting 10 minutes of agony on it. He's in a good enough position in the match that he accepts it. Trade, rook f6. And I think they can more or less agree to an equal draw here. Maybe put the bishop this way. Bishop here, here. Sam pushes the a pawn. Okay, so he's just saying I'm going to go here and tie white up to the pawn. King b4 is going to stop the a pawn. Run the king far away from the pawn. So now if you're trying to mate the black king, you'll be letting this pawn queen. If you stay near this pawn, then you're not threatening to mate the king. White could sack and then clean up, or just move back and forth and call it a draw. And that's what they do. And Niels manages to hold that one just as it was maybe getting a little bit scary. The specter of an unfavored draw maybe appeared for a moment there for white at the end of that game.
Yeah, I was hopeful, but I think Niels defended very precise, and I couldn't find a way through.
Yeah, rook
Yeah, I was
c3,
also thinking
c2.
at some point it's getting likely to unfavored draw for me.
Yeah, I was hopeful, but I couldn't find a way.
Yeah.
No, you defend good there.
I think, yeah, probably. But it was definitely a theme towards the end.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
yeah, it was actually quite interesting. I thought this ending, generally black is going for some opposite colored bishop, for instance. It's quite likely that I will be favored draw somehow, but
yeah.
just on general terms, without any concrete.
Yeah, but I thought that I think actually once white commits the bishop to f4, it's already easier to play black. I mean, sure, it's equal, but like.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't play play very well. It was more this general idea that.
Yeah, I had this exact position all the way up to rook takes g4 against Maxime in the Grand Prix. So that. Yeah, I had it all the way to rook takes g4. So he played rook d3 instead of rook d2. But yeah, it helped that, okay, I didn't have rook g4 in my notes, but I found it in that game, and I'm like, yeah, okay, now I just remember. So.
Yeah. Ah, okay. I didn't know that. I didn't check, of course.
Yeah.
I had this ending as well once, but it was some time ago.
So what are our final thoughts
on this? It was kind of the only game today where it was really a big theme, this favor draw.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
yeah.
Well, actually, the first game was in the Najdorf. Like, if I started losing pawns, okay, probably I'll just lose the game then. But like.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's more either you lose the game or it will be some perpetual with equal material.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Yeah, I felt like I should be totally crushing at some point, but I just couldn't find the way. And
no, okay. What I did was incredibly strange. This that I attacked both your knights. I mean, I couldn't believe that it worked, but
yeah,
couldn't refute it.
But yeah, it was funny because like today it felt a little less relevant. There were no favored draws today, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I mean, in the last game it was a theme, but didn't happen.
It was definitely a theme, but like you had to defend very accurately, I think, because it's not hard to like get some position with this same 3-on-1, but I have an f pawn and a bishop on e4, and then it's just a favored draw for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you will never be able to make progress.
I mean, the important thing was that the queen versus 3 minor pieces is scored as 9-9 and an equal draw, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of funny that nobody could win a pawn in that endgame, and that it really was just an equal draw. Did either of you have a hope in that game? Were either of you, while you were playing that game, thinking like maybe I'm going to get ahead?
I mean, the game in general, I thought I'm close to losing. I mean, throughout.
I mean, at first I thought I was totally crushing, but then once it went wrong and I had the queen against the 3 pieces, I was just trying to make a regular draw. I felt like if I try to get the a6 pawn or something, I'm probably just going to lose, and if I lose the f5 pawn, it's just over. So like, I felt like there was no way I could possibly get a favored draw. I was just hoping to save the game at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I was definitely trying to press. I don't know if my move.
Yeah, I think it was actually quite important that I managed to play g6 and fix the g7 pawn, because if these pawns exchange, I think I'm just going to lose.
Yeah, Niels, I suspected you were trying to win that endgame, but I wasn't sure, because I wasn't sure about Sam's attitude, because from his moves, I also wondered if he might be thinking he could still win too.
Well, I mean, if Niels had like crazy overpressed, I would have tried, but there I was just like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
especially given the match situation that I was up at that point, I didn't want to take like massive risks. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think also black should be the one that has more things to try in such.
Of course, yeah. I mean, if black wants to make a draw, there's nothing I can do to stop you. Just put the bishop on b5 and wait, and I'll never do a thing. But
I didn't find any way to. I mean, what I could at some point maybe try to take a pawn and allow some perpetual, just that I didn't see exactly when.
Clever. That's true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point maybe f5 was hanging, but you had an immediate perpetual, and I realized too late.
I didn't realize that. You should have just taken the pawn.
Yeah, I should have taken. I realized it just after that. Actually, that was quite a nice chance to get a favorite draw.
Oh, it's right here actually. I think, guys. After
can you show us the screen or no?
I'll mess everything up if I show.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just.
But I think it's basically when Niels played maybe bishop b5 attacking your d pawn, and you played queen h1 to give check on a8 and b7.
Which move number?
33.
Okay,
it's also on the Twitch. You can see it there.
Oh yeah, so he can play bishop takes d3, and then it's just then I'm screwed.
It's quite likely that it's a favorite draw. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely like I can never take anything. Like
everything's
everything is defended.
Yeah, that's very clever. That was the way. That was the spot where it was relevant today.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't sure something like that. I mean, because you give check and maybe c5 is hanging with check, and then I'm no longer up material.
Yeah, so if I can, that's true. I get the queen to c8.
But yeah, it's true that it was definitely an important theme also in this ending.
Yeah, for sure.
7, queen c8. Oh yeah, and you get back the pawn. And equal draw.
That's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but that's where it really mattered.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there was, and then the game that Niels won, I thought was actually like, at some point I was thinking about this a little bit, but like, I don't know, I just tried too hard to win the end game. Like I was.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was mainly just,
it should just be equal, but when I played bishop takes c5, what I was sort of dreaming was that I will take the 2 kingside pawns and then somehow get a favored draw, just because like I'll be too stuck to do anything against the c pawn. But this was too ambitious, and then next thing I know, he's just making it
pushing, because you can, if you don't want to, you of course, I mean, you can never have problem. You're just better in many ways, probably.
Yeah, no, okay. This was also a very up and down game, of course. I felt like I should have been in big trouble at some point, but
yeah, exactly. But also I was most likely lost at some moment as well.
Yeah, I thought I was very optimistic once I got queen c7 and then bishop e6.
The favorite draw didn't seem like a big theme. Actually, at no point in this game, I thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, whenever a game is decisive, I mean, in both of these games it sort of.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, there actually was a spot where this was relevant, the favorite draw, because I was thinking in this game, this would have been. Let me just find the spot.
Mm-hmm.
This was like, on move 35, queen d5. I was thinking if white goes knight b6 and then queen c4. I mean, maybe it's just irrelevant, but like, and then it's maybe it's just lost. But I was thinking like if we get a pure bishop endgame, I'm definitely not winning, but I'm going to be pawn up, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I was thinking that. I mean, it might just win anyway because like white's kingside will fall, but yeah, no, you played better anyway, so. Yeah, so this was. Did we get Venko in for an interview too, or no?
I don't know if he wants to join us.
Yeah, I think he joined at the end of the last one.
Okay,
so
cool.
let's see if he's in the
Sam,
chat.
it was when Niels played knight c5 in that game you're just discussing. That's where you couldn't find like the right choice, right?
I mean, I somehow like I knew I was much better before, and at this point I wasn't sure anymore. And in general, like it's sort of hard when you're much better and then you screw it up and it's equal to just admit, okay, fine, time to make a draw. And I think like if I wanted to make a draw here, it would have just been an equal draw very easily. But I pushed a little bit too hard, and then next thing I know, I'm just lost. Like this bishop on a3 is really good.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, cool. So it looks like Venceslav is going to join us here. And
Perfect. I'm sure he'll have some questions for us.
Yeah.
That was a really fun match too. But
yeah, very.
It was quite interesting games, I have to say.
It was what?
Quite dramatic games.
Yeah, well, okay. It helps that we got people who fight. Finally, in the very last game, I was like, all right, enough of this fighting. Let me be boring and play the Berlin. But we had a lot of fighting positions.
I mean, we only had Sicilians until you did that, right, Sam?
No, I won one game in a hedgehog.
Oh, right. The fourth game.
That was actually my favorite game of the match.
The
That was the
symmetrical
one I was
English.
happiest with. Sorry?
The symmetrical English. Yeah.
Yeah, that turned into a hedgehog. That was the one I was happiest with from my own play.
Yeah, there you played quite.
I really liked that I just let the e4 pawn stay forever and just sort of played around it. And because if I ever take it in that position, if the queens ever come off, black puts the king on e7, he's just totally fine. So I just found a way to like play around it. And I found this king f2 to e3 plan, and I had calculated that rook c5, rook takes d7 was winning. And yeah. So.
It looked very risky when you brought the king to e3 that game.
Well, I mean, once the king's on e3, it's not risky at all, because whenever I want to take e4 and make a draw, I can do it. The real question was after king f2, can he play rook c5 and g5? And the answer is no, because I have rook takes d7 as a very important resource, was what I had seen. I don't know if you have that position up, but
no, I had the previous game, but I can go find that one.
Yeah, sure. This one was my favorite. I was very happy with myself for this one.
Sam, did you play Titled Tuesday today?
I did. I lost to Magnus in the last round.
Okay, yeah, because we were like looking at your game history to pull up games with Niels, and we're like, oh, he like played a practice game with Magnus right before this.
Nah, I forgot my analysis. I gave a pawn, forgot why, and then I was just dead lost. I played pretty well in Titled Tuesday, except for this last round game with Magnus. But yeah.
Okay, so what move should I go to? I've got the hedgehog up.
Yeah, this was the most critical moment. Let me just find it. It was it was when I played King F2 on move 25. The key point was that that I had to see was that rook c5 I have rook takes d7, because without that I'm probably gonna get slaughtered. But I believe rook takes d7 is working.
Yeah, I thought it was working at least during the game.
Yeah.
That
I thought was extremely important, because otherwise king f2 is asking for trouble. But if he can't go rook c5 there and I get my king to e3, I'm never risking anything, because I can always go queen takes e4, and I thought that I'm just sort of sitting on it, and I was very happy with this one.
So this would have been the one moment if you have to back up with your queen.
Yeah, no, then he's got a lot of counterplay. Then I don't want this at all.
Then he can play a move like maybe e5 and just start
or g5. Yeah, I mean, like so it was very important. I thought that rook c5 is not working.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to show chat one of the variations that you super GMs are assuming. Queen check, attacking here, and then when the rook blocks, he's got the back rank mate. So.
Yeah.
That was nice. No, it was a very good game, I thought. It was the only game I thought that was quite clean in the match. But yeah.
But okay, it's rapid. But no, I thought this was really fascinating. Like it was funny because some games, like the favorite draw just was completely irrelevant, and in some games it was like a huge factor.
Yeah, definitely. And in some games, like for instance yesterday, this where I won with black in this neither pick, it felt like a very logical improvement of the favorite draw, let's say.
Yeah.
Because it's clear I was better all game, and also clear that quite often it will anyway end in a draw. So you're sort of
right. Also, you were black too in that one, so.
Yeah.
And then the scramble and the other one where you got the favorite draw was super interesting too. I mean, I got totally outplayed in that phase, but like It was abundantly clear nobody's winning, but this could be 3-1, or it could be 2-2, or it could be 1-3, and this is where I was just totally outplayed, right?
We handled it very well, but it was adding definitely some tension to the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three ways.
Let's see if Ventureslav is coming.
Sam, did the match with Surya help you in this match here?
A little bit. So one thing that I made up my mind about after my match with Surya was I got clobbered pretty badly because when I got bad positions, I was never really trying to bail out into like an unfavored draw. I was always trying to like fight all the way, and I just lost a lot of games. And so here with Neil is like I told myself, don't be so scared of an unfavored draw because just mathematically, like the 5-0 is a 5-point jump, but 3-1 is a 2-point jump. So actually, like if you have a bad position, an unfavored draw, like the jump there is bigger than the jump from unfavored draw to even draw. So like when I had this bad position in the Najdorf game, like I didn't make any particular effort to make a full draw. Like at first I was just trying to defend as well as I could, not to lose, and then once it became clear I'm not losing this game, I didn't really try that hard to save the full equal draw because I just thought I'm just asking for trouble if I do.
Yeah. Yeah, similar to not pressing too hard for a win, right? Like sometimes letting go and like accepting what you have to.
The calculus is a little bit different there because if, let's say you assume if I press for a win, there's a 50-50 chance I get it, but there's also a 50% chance it's just a normal draw. Mathematically, jumping from 3-1 to 5-0 is a bigger jump than jumping backwards from 3-1 to 2-2.
Sure.
So I think it makes more sense for you to try to like really push for that win if you assume equal probability. Well, if you're defending, it makes more sense to just like, get your 1 point.
I agree. The math is totally different. I'm just saying there's a similar process of like sort of pushing too hard for a result you want versus like accepting and, defending when you have to or making a draw when you have to, etc. Those kind of things, right? It's
Right. So from a commentator's perspective, and just a viewer, what did you think of this, like watching it?
I thought it was super exciting, but I don't know if it's because you played like a bunch of great Sicilians for me or because of the endgame thing, but I've also grown more and more interested in endgames, and I think that the scoring has the most effect on the endgame, so it added a little more interest at the end of several of the endgames, so there was a little boost there. Right where some games you would just sort of give up on it and be like, okay, well, they're going to draw the game. I might not even watch the last 3 moves. Instead, it was like, kept me glued to it.
Right. Like this Berlin was like interesting because if I want to just be super lazy, just let him take the F pawn. It's an easy draw with the 4-on-3. But then I'm like, that's an unfavored draw. So I've got to work a little bit to make sure that it's an equal draw. I'm like, wait, can I get away with taking A2? Let's give this a try.
Yeah. It was a very exciting ending.
Calculate taking an A2.
Sorry, what?
Unfavored draw, because then you will never have less material if it works.
Right. So as long as I don't lose a piece, which I was pretty sure I didn't. So.
Yeah. No, you put some pressure on Niels, and there's like a lot of these scenarios where if you guys had been playing against somebody less good, like say against me, you could have turned one of the equal draws into a favored draw, right? Just by calculating some little variation, getting away with one extra pawn, and then
it occurred to me actually in the final game in this Berlin. So C4 was fine, rook E3, CB3, C.
He's frozen.
I think he's frozen. Is he joining as well, or?
B3, but perhaps instead of A5, it was better for me to play rook.
You got slightly frozen for a bit, Sam. So
I was thinking maybe after A5, rook C2 was just good. I missed that after rook F1 check, and then bishop B1, he just goes rook C1 back, and it's still equal draw. Perhaps instead of that, if I had started with rook F1 check, it might have been more interesting because if I can regroup my bishop around to C6, I might get a favored draw.
So you're saying instead of C5?
No, instead of A5, I think it was.
Instead of A5, okay.
Let me just see.
Give your check immediately.
So yeah, because
extra cake.
or no, sorry, no. Yeah, right. Instead of no, a5 is good. A5, rook c3. If I give this check here, no, but then he's gonna have rook f7 at the end, so that doesn't work. No, like yeah, maybe it's just not working the whole way. I don't know, but maybe I should have played c5 instead of a5. Yeah, that was probably the way actually.
C5
instead of a5 looked stronger. Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, because after a5, rook c3, I couldn't do anything. But after c5, rook c3, white doesn't actually have a huge threat. So I should have time to play f5 and then rook c2, rook f1 check, king b2, bishop b1, take and put the bishop on e4, and I make a favored draw.
Yeah, that looks quite convincing.
Yeah, so c5 would have probably been the way here.
Huh. It's interesting.
I mean, I don't know. It's going to be very close. It's hard to tell, but.
Oh yeah, I mean this like calls for some analysis. This idea c5.
Right, because after c5, like if white doesn't want to do this rook c3, rook c2 right away, I think you're running serious risk of losing. Like if my king runs to b4, like you can just lose the game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I could imagine that.
So, yeah, and if rook c3, I think it's just favored draw immediately after f5.
Yeah, unless I can play rook d8 and try to go with the other rook.
Sorry, rook c3 you want, instead of rook c3 you want what?
Rook c3, let's say, and f5, then rook d8.
But if rook b1 check?
Yeah, I was... you anyway...
Yeah, as soon as I get my bishop to e4, it's favored draw, right?
Yeah.
And if you try too hard to avoid it, you can very easily lose.
Yeah, I mean, I might just lose the 5.
Yeah, but this is sort of like, okay, so I played a5, which is a mistake then. c5 would have been stronger. But this is what I'm talking about. Like, this is sort of my attitude I had with Surya, was like, I have to like fight really hard not to get the unfavored draw. But I think with white after c5, you should just make the unfavored draw and move on. Because I think if you try to avoid it, you're very likely to lose.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see maybe a b4 idea to try and draw here for white.
At which moment?
After f5 and bishop b1.
So f5, rook c2, or f5, you want b4 directly?
No, the same move that Niels played, rook d8, rook check, king b2, bishop b1, and then you can go b4 here.
Oh, yeah, okay. But still, like, if I put the bishop on e4 and put my king on b5, it's going to be hard to take one of the pawns. I mean, I'll have a perpetual pretty quickly, I'd think, right?
Right. Well, I think a key point is after c takes b4, rook d7 check, you can play king b8 instead of king a6.
The king b8, rook g3, don't I get mated?
Maybe.
Or rook h3?
Uh-oh.
But king a6 is fine. Rook
King
c7,
A6 is
bishop
fine.
e4, rook takes a7 check, king b5, and I will just give rook f2 check immediately and just make a draw like that.
Yeah, it should be, I mean...
So I'll never have time to counterattack these b pawns.
Okay, you also have to be careful. Like, rook b1 is not joking around.
Yeah,
that's
but
true.
also just endless checks, because if we trade rooks, I will never be able to take anything.
Yeah, I should give a perpetual check very easily here and then get a favored draw. So I actually think c5 probably would have made a favored draw.
Yeah, it's like it.
And a5, then after rook c3, white's definitely saving the game.
Yeah, I gotta believe you
Yeah,
guys.
so lots of interesting missed opportunities from today's match for sure.
Yeah.
Because Niels also had the favored draw, or didn't? No, he didn't because of queen c8 and c5 check. But
yeah, probably not. I mean, it requires analysis at least.
Yeah, but it makes these positions so much more interesting. Like right around when normally we just shake hands and call a game over.
Yeah.
What would be your thought, Niels, about trying this kind of scoring system in, like, I don't know, the European individual championships, for example?
No, it would be interesting to try it out. I mean, in general, I'm all for trying new things. I think from a general perspective, it would actually be quite interesting to play it in classical chess, because I feel like the most interesting moments are where it matters the most, and generally we are down to seconds anyway, and it becomes quite random. Like it would be That would be it would be nice to have some complicated ending where all three, let's say, results are possible, and then have some time to think about it properly, like to really investigate. That's the only downside I see with this what we did here.
Yeah, and I think it really increases the complexity of your decision making and also changes how preparation works. Like, okay, Neil's never played e5 today, but I had prepared this.
For me personally, probably it doesn't matter too much because I anyway don't really play those kind of openings. But for some players, they would probably have to adjust quite a lot.
But for example, in e4, e5, I actually think if the favored draw exists, one of the best lines for white, I was thinking, is probably the 4 knights, because there's this line bishop b5, knight d4, bishop c4, and like there's this long perpetual at the end where black is exchanged down or something. Like I was thinking it's actually not so easy to equalize against the 4 knights thanks to the favored draw.
Like this?
I can't see your board, but like
Rubinstein, 4 knights?
Yeah. This one.
Bishop b5, knight d4. I can't remember exactly how this line goes. Niels probably knows it better, but like...
Yeah, many ways, but it's generally some...
yeah, it's like bishop c4, bishop c5, knight d4, bishop c4, bishop c5, I want to say, and then like... So knight takes e5 then?
Knight takes e5, queen e7.
Right, and then there's like a quick d... Where does d5 come? Is it knight f3, d5?
I think so.
Yeah, it's like knight f3, d5, bishop takes d5, bishop g4, d3, castle queenside, bishop e3, and then it's like knight takes d5, knight takes d5, rook takes d5, I want to say it is.
Yeah, I think so.
And then it's like bishop takes f3, is that right?
G takes, bishop takes f3, g takes.
And then is it queen h4, or am I imagining that?
I think it's rook e8 here. Because
yeah, that might be right.
Than like queen h4 and stuff.
It was like, yeah, I don't remember exactly, but
in general, such a line will become completely unplayable for black because it's clear.
Exactly. So it just means that the 4 knights becomes a much tougher opening for black to play, because that's what I was planning to do today. I didn't review enough because I didn't remember everything that well, but yeah, after knight d4, bishop c4, it's bishop c5, knight e5. Yeah, that's right. Knight f3, d5, and then bishop d5, bishop g4.
I'm gonna slow you guys down for 1 second for the audience to understand the implications of what you guys are saying, because you guys are on a different level. So what they're saying is this opening here currently would not be played by white because it ends with a perpetual check, right? So right now, players playing white wouldn't want to play this opening in a professional tournament. But if you had the favored draw, white would get 3 points versus 1 when black administers a perpetual check, having sacrificed material. Suddenly, if black's not able to play this this sort of aggressive sacrificial variation, black needs a whole new way to defend the 4 knights.
Right. Yeah, so I remember now. It's in the position after e takes d5. I don't know if you have that on the board, but it goes rook e8. And then there's a couple things that white can do, but I think the easiest would be to castle. Bishop takes f3. G takes f3. Bishop d6, I think it is. f4. Queen h4, king g2. And black is dead lost if he doesn't play knight takes c2 and give queen g4, queen f3. I think that's right, at least.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes a little bit harder to just equalize in general, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the drawing margin becomes a bit smaller.
It changes a lot which lines are more challenging and which lines are riskier. Like, but yeah, I definitely think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only downside is, of course, that you might also want to take less risk. Like, for instance, when you attack, you can often give some material, and you know that at the least there would be perpetual, or I would make some fortress. But to be honest, I did not really feel this was a big theme.
Well, yeah, I mean, like if you look at some like bishop g5 Najdorf, and you have some like super deep new idea that you want to test out, and it ultimately puts black under a ton of pressure, and at the end yeah, okay, it's equal because it draws by perpetual when you've sacked all your pieces. It becomes less enticing to play that.
Yeah, and also I mean also not only preparation but also in general.
Yeah.
But generally, if you are sacrificing something with the aim of getting an initiative, you're anyway trying to play for the win, yeah, not for the draw. So
Yeah, I don't think either of us were particularly shy about sacrificing stuff this match.
exactly.
Yeah.
I was actually expecting it to be a bigger, let's say, hindrance, or
Mhm.
make us play a little bit less ambitiously.
Right.
But it definitely wasn't the case.
Yeah.
I did not really, yeah,
It's
avoid
like,
any aggressive ways to play because of this system. That's for sure.
well, if Vinka's not going to come, I think I should probably be on my way at this point then. But yeah, this was great. And thanks a lot to Niels for accepting the challenge. I had a lot of fun. You're a great opponent.
Thank you for the lesson.
Yeah, great match, guys. So thanks to both of you for playing and joining us and sharing your thoughts. And thank you to Vinko for sponsoring and organizing the match for everybody to watch. And that's going to be it for today for us, folks.